Appreciate everybody's patience. We were meeting in open session to interview for an opening on the Parks and Rec Commission. I'll speak more about that later, but if you would now rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is a meeting of the San Carlos City Council and Redevelopment Agency for January 23rd. Should we do a roll call, Christine?
Sure. Councilmember Davis?
Here.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Present.
Councilmember Lewis?
Here.
Councilmember Inga Doherty?
Yes, here.
And Mayor Grocott.
Here. Next item on the agenda is changes to the order of the agenda. Staff, do we have any requests for changes?
We have none.
None. Council members? Hearing none. We'll move on to council communications and announcements.
The only thing I wanted to say is, I'm sorry, is that on?
Yeah,
Good.
fine.
Speak a little louder. And excuse me tonight, I'm fighting a cold a little bit, so if I'm not understandable, she's got a cold too, so don't let her flee. I've been trying to figure out the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG. There was a meeting, I think it was last week, and I've been actually trying to figure out, I know I've been appointed to it, but I haven't gotten the right information back as to whether or not, evidently it's an appointment by Council of Cities, and whether Mr. Eaton was appointed through June of '07, and whether or not that's something that, as we've designated me as the person to go on to that, but it's not clear to me that from the people I've talked to that I actually should attend yet. I think I have to talk to Council of Cities and see if I take over Don's term or not. So, Brian, do you have any facts on that? So I didn't go to the meeting is the bottom line. I realize it's a little long-winded. So
I was just going to clarify through the chair, there's actually two different ABAG representatives. There's the ABAG representative that represents the county. That was the one that Don Eaton filled. And then there is a ABAG representative for San Carlos. And I believe the latter is the one that you've been appointed to, Councilmember Lewis.
And maybe you could clarify for me, the information I've gotten so far, that's just then a twice-a-year meeting, not the every other month.
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
so
correct.
You're in good shape.
on this on the committee assignment, it said every other month on Thursday nights. So I just wanted you guys to know, if you're wondering about an updated report, it didn't happen.
You picked the right one.
Might have to give you some other assignments.
Fire.
Okay. Inga? Nothing? Down here?
Just mentioned that the SBSA is meeting on Friday. We have a short list of candidates for the new general manager's position, and hopefully we'll be able to resolve that fairly quickly and carry on with the new man or woman, as the case may be. And that's all I have.
I apologize. And, Tom, it's not because you said it, but whoever said it first, I promised that I would do this. When I was out there, I had no clue what the SBSA was. So my whole role here, because I went to the Council of Cities the other day and they gave me 3 pages of acronyms. And I can't memorize 3 pages of acronyms. So all I'm asking is that the first time we say it. Then we can say SBSA or ABAG or whatever. And I apologize, Tom. I'm not criticizing you. You just happen to be the first one to say it.
Well, let me clarify. The SBSA is the South Bayside Systems Authority. That is a joint powers authority of 4 members, Belmont, San Carlos, Redwood City, and West Bay, and they process our sewage. It's a very, very important part of our life. They process not only our sewage, but the total equivalent is about 25 million gallons a day. And there's a little more trivia to go along with this, but we'll handle that at some other time.
Thank you for indulging me.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Anything else? No, nothing. Okay. Well, I have a few things to report. One is I did attend a meeting, and it had really no impact on San Carlos, but I just, especially something that's coming up later about getting reimbursed for going to things, I thought I should announce that I went to a meeting of the Airport Roundtable. It was a special meeting where we were helping out essentially the communities of Atherton, Woodside, and Portola Valley and discussing the issue of planes coming over their community at a certain altitude. And I will say this, it is a strength to, when you have something like the Airport Roundtable, I guess it's a committee, meeting together. It's it's bringing together all the communities, all the 20 cities in the county together to deal with issues as they relate to the airport, and it gives a small community, especially like, one of the things that was mentioned at this meeting was you've got Portola Valley, which is, I think, a community of, 4,200 people or something like that. It's pretty small in population, large in area, but small in population. Gives them the opportunity to have some strength when it comes to a very large organization. One of the top employers in this county is the airport, and it gives a little community like that some strength. And so that was kind of the gist of the meeting. And so it's important for us to be a part of the Airport Roundtable, as we are, and someday we'll get our chance to have an issue and have the backup of all those other communities. I also wanted to announce that we had gotten in our council mail this announcement that there has been opened a memorial fund for music and studio recording at the, I hope I pronounced this correctly, the Rikis Center? Rikis Center in Redwood City. And it's a memorial fund in memory of Brent Collins, who recently passed away and was the son of Ronald and Gail Collins. And if you would like to give to that fund, you could contact the, what is it again, the Rikis? Rikis Center in Redwood City. Second item, or the third item actually that I had was I just wanted to make a note to the staff. We did have somebody come and speak to us, David and Tiffany Caro. They spoke at the council meeting about their situation with their automobiles in their garage, and I was hoping staff would at some point be bringing something back to council on that item, or if there's a way we could address that, not just for this family, obviously, but, for the whole city. And I noticed when I was reading through some things, our municipal code talks about design standards for parking spaces, and it talks about them in terms of being 8 foot 6 inches wide by 18 feet in length and being 7 foot clear. So I don't know if we have a conflict there between this part of our municipal code and the other part that he references in his letter or not. We might want to look into that. And those are all the things I have, except, as I said earlier, we did interview for Parks and Rec. I did want to comment that we had 14 applicants for one position, and a lot of good applicants. And I think I speak on behalf of the council when I say it's always, what's the word I'm looking for? It's always a good thing when we put out applications for positions like that, or post positions like that. We always seem to get a lot of interest from the community, a lot of people out there who want to be a part of helping out the community and being involved. And tonight was an example of that. And the other part of that is we always get a lot of good qualified people. It's difficult making a decision. We did make that decision tonight, and we chose Gordy Burton to fill the vacancy that was actually created by Brad when he ran for city council. So Gordy Burton will be our new Parks and Rec Commissioner. That concludes reports or council communications. Now we have item 4, which is reports to council from staff.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, we had 2 reports, the first of which is a verbal report, it's an update on the South Bayside Waste Management Authority, and Lisa Costa-Standers is here to give us an update on that.
Good evening. The South Bayside Waste Management Authority, we call it SBWMA, is our solid waste authority. It's a joint powers authority, and the authority is comprised of 12 member agencies, essentially from Burlingame in the north to East Palo Alto in the south, and the authority owns the facilities, that the former BFI facilities out in Shoreway and San Carlos. What I want to do is just give you a very brief overview of the process that we are undertaking to go out to a competitive bid for a facility and collection contractor. And the presentation I have right now is something that we have in a draft format. It'll be reviewed by the SBWMA board this Thursday, so I'm giving you the preview right now. And I've much abbreviated this presentation, but we'd like to give it to elected officials on February 7th. That meeting will be held in Redwood City Council chambers at 8 a.m., where we're looking for a little representation of elected officials from each of the member agencies. After that large meeting, we'll be bringing this full presentation to each city council or board of supervisors. So I'm giving you the short version tonight. The SBWMA has established a few committees to start working on this request for proposal process, and I should indicate that our contracts that we have in place is an operating agreement with BFI to operate the facilities, a collection agreement that each member agency has with Allied, and then we also have a disposal agreement for Ox Mountain. The two agreements that will be going out for requests for bids is the operating and the collection agreement, and those run through December 31st, 2010. Sounds like a long ways off, but you'll see when I get through the presentation that we have a lot of work to do to get to that point. You see at the top of this chart that we have the member agencies. That's really the decision-making body. The SBWMA board has established 3 committees, and we're asking for each member agency to appoint their staff to those committees. We've established a program and facilities committee, process and contract committee, and then a selection committee. We're currently in the process of recruiting for an executive director. We hope to make that announcement very soon, and that person will really be overseeing this entire process with all of the SBWMA staff and consultants. The Program and Facilities Committee will really go through the needs assessment. What types of service levels do we want to have? As an example, do we want to continue with curbside, backyard service, or do we want to go semi-automated, fully automated? Do we want to have the resident choose the container that they want to have, or do we want the contractor to provide those containers? Just there's a whole range of decisions that we need to make regarding the service levels. Also the facilities. Do we need to make any changes at the facilities to accommodate the new programs? Next would be the Process and Contract Committee. And that committee is really going to be starting to draft the request for proposals and draft the contract. So we talk about how would this new contractor be compensated under the new agreement? What types of performance standards do we want to have? Are there going to be liquidated damages or incentives for diversion? Those types of items will go through the Process and Contract Committee. And finally, the Evaluation and Selection Committee. For that committee, we're hoping to get mostly city managers to attend, and they would review and evaluate all the requests for proposals and make a recommendation to the board that then comes before each member agency. Quickly taking you through the schedule, you'll understand the timeline here. Right now, we're really at step 1 and step A and B, where we'd like to start giving you this approach to each member agency. And we've highlighted in yellow all the opportunities for member agency input. We want to make sure this is a very open, public process where we have a lot of opportunity for input. All of the meetings of the committees that I just discussed will be open public meetings that any member of the public can attend, and we may also encourage some of the potential bidders to attend as well. So we hear their comments early on and not when it's too late. So we'll be walking through at each steps key milestones back to each member agency so we get your input and we get your commitment to the process. Once we've established the needs and kind of the programs that we'd like to have, we'll bring that back to the City Council for some direction. Once we have the RFP ready and we're ready to issue it, again, we'll come back to the City Council for direction. If you go through down to item 5 is when we're really going to start reviewing the proposals, and that'll occur in late 2007. The selection committee will make a recommendation of the contractor, and that will be down in item 6 in mid-2000 to late mid-2008. What we need to make sure is we have at least a year to a year and a half once we've selected the new contractor to give them time to route the service area, to order their vehicles, and to really get up to speed so that they can fully implement the new service on January 1st of 2011. I've gone through some of the milestones in the last slide, but this just shows you the times where we're going to be coming back to the City Council for some direction. approving the contractor sometime in October of December in 2008. And then, as I said, new service would begin 2011. The commitment that we'd like to have from each member agency is, as I said, assign staff to work on those committees, provide the input in the services. We are also going to be bringing to you a code of conduct that we'd like to discuss when we come back, probably in March, and also agree in good faith to really work with the SBWMA on the recommended contractor. I think it's key that all agencies work together well in this process so that we're able to select that contractor. Finally, as I indicated, we will be having a meeting of elected officials on February 7th, and we'll be bringing this full presentation back to you shortly after that meeting. And then the committees are going to start their meetings very soon to get this process going. Be happy to try to answer any of your questions.
Just one question, Lisa. Is this an opportunity for the agency to grow, or are the members fixed in place and nothing changes?
This is probably a good opportunity if there's another jurisdiction that's interested in joining. I think we're always open to that concept, but now once the new services and the new contracts are being established, it's probably a better opportunity to do that. But at any time, if there's an agency that's interested in joining, I'd be happy to talk to them.
So, thank you.
Lisa, you said there were 12 cities that are involved in this?
Correct. It also includes the county and West Bay Sanitary District.
Okay, so say 14?
No, I'm sorry, that's within the 12.
Within the 12. How do, just a quick question, how do you, what is it, like 7 to 5 or 6 to, whatever, 6 to 6? I mean, how do you do this?
It's a two-thirds vote.
Two-thirds, so it's
We
two-thirds
need
has
8.
to, okay, it has to be 8.
And that's just what we did when we had the Joint Powers Agreement, brought that before the City Council where we had some changes to the Joint Powers Agreement. Once 8 of the cities had approved that, it became an effective document.
Thank you.
We certainly want, though, to get, consensus on all of these items.
Down here, any questions? No? I just have one question, and that is when, I remember when we talked earlier about going out for the RFQ and it being a long process, it indeed sets it up as some time out there before anything might change. So in the meantime, how do you keep the Allied Waste, I guess it is now, how do you keep your feet to the fire on things? There's obviously been a lot in the paper recently about missed pickups, 20-minute left on hold when you call to try and get some help, Christmas trees not being picked up because there's a change in policy that nobody knew about, things like that. So how do you, how are we dealing with those things?
Right. Well, one of the mechanisms is we're conducting an annual performance hearing, and that's one of the reasons you see all the articles in the papers. We very recently had that performance hearing, and in that performance hearing, we evaluated BFI's performance under the criteria that's established in the contract, and we appreciated the attention that the press gave it because I think that really helps maybe BFI, or excuse me, Allied a little more responsive. But there are some items in the contracts where we do have the ability to impose liquidated damages, and we're going to be looking very closely at doing that. Also, we're going to not wait for this process to finish, but we're currently negotiating some items in the current contracts. They were recently extended, as you know, and there's some items that we would like to continue to negotiate with Allied on. There's a few things they would like as well. So we're going to tighten up some of those performance standards and some of the reporting requirements as well.
And follow up on that then, if it does not seem that they're meeting the standards that are being asked for by the community, and we were to terminate, we could do that, correct? We could terminate?
We do have the ability in the agreement that if they are not achieving the performance standards and the liquidated damages is at a certain level, that's grounds for terminating the contract, yes.
Okay, and then if that were to happen, given the length of this process, what happens in the meantime?
Well, we need to work something out. I'm sure there's a lot of haulers out there that are very interested in this service area. One of the issues is getting the equipment. I don't think staffing is going to be much of an issue to bring people on board, but we'd have to work something out.
Okay. I guess what I'm hearing is it's not really all that realistic to terminate a contract with such a large
It would be difficult given the size of the
Yeah,
service
because of the
area.
transition into getting someone else to come in and do the
Right,
service.
and we currently have very complex programs, and one of the things we'd like to look at is maybe simplifying those. I mean, every city is a little bit different, whether we have curbside, backyard, the different levels of commercial services. It was really at the convenience of the customer that all these services were established. So it would be difficult bringing somebody in very quickly.
Thank you. We do have a speaker on this. This is not a public hearing, but we do have a speaker card from Pat Bell.
Excuse me, Pat Bell, San Carlos. I'd like to know what if there's going to be a process for San Carlos to find out how our citizens feel about what they want this garbage service to be, so that then our representatives can take it to SBWMA, because I can go to the SBWMA meetings and say whatever I want, but that doesn't mean anything because it's the cities who ask SBWMA to do thus and such, and this is what we want. So I'd like for San Carlos to hear from its citizens what they want. Thanks.
Thank you. Do you want to speak to that?
We very briefly talked about how we want to do that needs assessment, and once that committee gets going, they're going to define that. But some of the things we've talked about would be mailing a questionnaire to every resident, every commercial customer to ask them what do they want in the services, and then also to hold a series of focus group meetings. So if it's something that the council would like to do, we could hold a San Carlos focus group or kind of a little town hall to do that needs assessment.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. That concludes that report. And we have another item on here, 4B.
At our last meeting, we were asked to bring forward a status report on the Enterprise Resource Planning, sometimes referred to as ERP. And we've provided you with a schedule with an update on the status of the implementation of that program, and staff is available to answer any questions that you might have.
Yes, please come.
Just through the chair, ERP, for all of those who don't know, is a financial application for financial.
And HR.
Financial and HR, exactly.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Rick.
Well, if I might add on to what the city manager addressed, is your concern. I believe it was brought up in the Harvey Rose report at the last council meeting, where council expressed an interest in better tracking contracts and the expenditures toward those contracts. And we have looked at that with our Munis system, the system we implemented the first July of 05, excuse me, July of 06, July of 04? 4. Time flies. It's been a year and a half now. And we implemented the HR system in January a year ago. But the financial system, when we're just now getting ready to go into our first budget cycle, and we're going to set up a new account for contracts that will allow us to track these two ways. One is a project, but also through the contract account number, and we will instruct the departments on how to set those up at the beginning of the fiscal year and be able to track those costs separately from any other cost in their department, so that information will be readily available to them at any time.
So what I hear you saying, Richard, is that in our new fiscal year, we will be able to receive more succinct reports on budgeting and where we are on things?
Well, there are a number of issues with reporting out. We've addressed some of them in the report, but yes, even right now, the departments are able to call for special reports. Just give us the parameters of what they're looking for, and we can run those reports much easier than we could before in the old system, which was no longer being supported by the vendor. But with our new system, as we implement the budget system, as we go forward with all the reporting capabilities that system has, as well as Crystal Reports, which is a report writer that we have also purchased, we'll be able to, the departments will be able to generate these reports themselves. So there'll be much more timely reporting for the departments, and the council can get regular updates on the budget versus actuals, and that can be more easily done. Right now, that's a very cumbersome process for us. We're actually pulling the information off the system, putting it into Excel spreadsheets, reformatting, bringing all the accounts together that make up something like a Parks and Rec or planning fees or building development fees. We're having to bring those from all different departments so that you can see a picture that's somewhat summarized and easy to manage. And the system will be able to do that for us once we fully implement all the reporting capabilities that are there.
Okay, I want to allow my other council members to ask any questions. I have some more questions, but
I just had one question, Richard. In terms of the time frames and the due dates, are those pretty sure? And do you expect to be able to hold pretty much on those dates?
We do. Those are as of about a week ago when we put this report together. So the closer we get, the more confident that we feel that we'll be able to make those. We have had some technical issues along the way that we've been working with Munis very carefully on to resolve. We've been able to resolve those. Some have been more painful than others. And any of us in this room who have been through an implementation or two realize it is fraught with all kind of things that you never thought about. One of the good aspects of going through this kind of painful process is it's forced us to look at our business practices and review those, whether it's how do we calculate overtime, what about holiday pay, all these various rules that we have set up. We have to go through that rule-making process all over again with Munis. Forces us to look at those, review them very carefully, make sure we're setting up the right process. So that's been both a delay, but it's also been a plus for the system.
So as we move along into the year, you can keep us posted should these dates begin to slip, or perhaps a periodic updating of the timeline would be helpful for us.
Right, we will. And I just want to note that because we're moving to a one-year budget and we're going to start that process next month with your work session, we have accelerated the budget implementation so we can be ready and the departments can be ready with their budget information and be able to do that through the Munis system starting in late February.
It seems like trying to do some monthly tracking for the budget's a pretty important tool. Where's that on the priority list, and when will that come in, do you think, on the current schedule?
Right now, the departments can get that information. They're not able to get it themselves, but they can call for that information from finance and get whatever budget information they need. They are getting monthly reports, but they can get reports anytime during the month as well on that. It's not as cosmetically easy to look at and analyze as what we will eventually have, but we expect that by September we'll have that reporting capability on the desk and like on the desk of the users. And I was going to say that Munis has a library of 700 reports, and we have had some problems getting access to those because of the way that our system, our database system, is configured versus what Munis is used to. But we are working through those problems, and we believe that by September we'll have that reporting capability available to all.
Because it seems unusually cumbersome to get something that seems on the surface pretty simple in a way. I mean, track how you're doing the budget, right? I mean, that's what we all do. So, and that'll be 2.5 years from the point at which we started the first implementation of the software. So I didn't see the original contract. Did we expect, was there an original schedule that was supposed to take this one? Where do we accrue to the schedule that they had estimated originally?
Yeah, we're certainly late. We implemented early. Council authorized the budget in late February of 2004, and then about 4 months later, we went live with our financials. And financials are extremely hard to do and get right, and we purposely delayed our HR implementation until January 1. So we were on target up to then, through January. But we got off track for some of the reasons I mentioned before about Well, user IDs was a big problem because we are depending very heavily and wanted very much to buy the workflow process where a department could enter a requisition on Munis, and it could be routed to the supervisor for approval, routed to finance for approval, all electronically, not having to generate paper, not having to at any time pull it out of the system and do any kind of review. It could all be reviewed online. Invoices could be matched up online against that. It could be paid online. So the whole process was to be automated. One of the advantages of that workflow is the triggers to send it on to the next level for approval or the next level for processing was to be done electronically through an email system. And if we had these 2 user IDs that everybody had to have on their desktop, they would have to be going constantly in and out of different systems in order to find out what they were supposed to be looking at and improving. And we have worked with Munis very carefully, very intensely for a number of months and finally got that resolved earlier this month. So those things are not anticipated, but they've created months and months of delay.
Right.
But we had to get them right in order to get the functionality that we all expected to get.
In my experience, working in a proprietary software environment where we have to get projects done, sometimes you can get a little hypnotized by the options and the details. So sometimes just focusing on 1 or 2 priorities, like let's get monthly reports for staff and for council so we can track the budget. I guess I'd encourage you just to try to get some bold prioritizations and see if we can get Munis in a service capacity to help out. And that leads me to my other question, which is, are you happy with the level of service and attention that we've been getting as a project from Munis on this project, getting this going?
Overall, I would say yes. There's certainly some times and some issues that have come up where we have been challenged to maintain that optimistic attitude. But we have brought it to their attention. We've gone to the highest levels. We have withheld payments on things where we didn't feel like they were forthcoming. They have responded, and there are times where they've done some things on some of our PERS reporting. It's a good example for our retirement system with PERS, Public Employee Retirement System, sorry. They have gone out of their way to build the monthly reports, and now they're working on quarterly reports for us that will automate the process of our reporting to PERS, which we had not originally anticipated. We didn't think about. We didn't think about all these issues, the potentials that we could use the system. And they have said, no, that's an idea, let's go work on it, and they have done an excellent job. So I would say, all in all, I think we picked the right vendor, and we're happy overall, and they continue to show that they'll move whatever mountains they need to move to keep us happy. I might mention that there are a number of cities and 8 public agencies that have joined, have signed up with Munis since we joined, and that is both a problem in that it diverts their resources, but it's also a positive in that we've got more bargaining power because we've got more California agencies.
Sure. That's good, but well, of course we're paying them to take care of our problems. So here's the question I have: has Munis bought off on this schedule? Will they?
Yes.
And will they commit to that? And can we? Do you think we have them focused?
We have them focused. We are also working ourselves to get more of our staff time available. As I mentioned in the report, we have a person who's dividing their energies between this project and accounting responsibilities in the department, and we're trying to free those up so we can have more of our resources working on this. And I might go back to your first point about prioritization. That's what we've done with budget. We've moved it up on the schedule in order to make that a priority so that the departments can have the tools that they need, and we can start the year off in good fashion.
Great. Thank you very much.
Had a couple of questions, actually. Noticed that we've got about $132,000 left out of the initial budget. I know that that's come down. Originally, I think we had reserved $1.2 million, if I'm not mistaken, and now we're down at about $100,000. Do you feel fairly confident that that's where it's going to come in, that the $132,000 is enough to cover the consulting services through the remainder of basically what's on this timeline?
Well, going back to the budget several years ago, we had 1.5, got it down to 1.2, and then when council actually awarded, they awarded almost $852,000. And we do have $132,000 left as of December 31st. There are, I will say yes, but with one qualifier. There are two pieces, self-service for the employees and self-service for customers, for those being able to go onto our website and get financial information. We need to define those better to see that we can implement those within the budget. I feel like we can implement all the things we bought with those two exceptions. I'm not ready to say that, yes, I'm definitely confident we can do that, because those have not been defined, the parameters haven't been established as well as we need to know, have a good estimation of what that's going to cost us. I might note that one of the ways that the council got to that budget of $852,000 was to reduce some of the categories, reduce training from Munis, cut that about in half to about $60,000, and cut a contingency we had for third-party software if we were to need it. We may be back to say, yes, we need some of that money, but at this time, I'm not prepared to do that. I think we're going to do our best to live within the budget in the remaining $132,000.
Okay, I had two follow-up questions, actually. One, I noticed in the staff report that you have on the September 30th deadline, the decentralization of purchasing. I know generally that implies an automated workflow and approval process. And my question relates to how is that being decided internally, and what are the parameters around maintaining the approval process? Is it governed by, California state law in terms of who has what approval levels, or is it something that's being set by the finance department working in conjunction with the city manager?
We have that approval prioritization, approval levels already established. There are certain things that the municipal code establishes, what goes to council, what can be approved by the city manager or the finance director. But this is much more detailed than that, and this is in addition to that. It's much more refined in terms of the lower expense items. And those rules are established by the city. The finance department takes the lead on that, setting up the approvals. And we will continue that and meet with the departments so we make sure that with a new system that the departments have this whatever level of control they need, and that we're still complying with the code. So it is established internally, but all within the municipal code.
And we're balancing sort of staff efficiency against the necessary checks and balances and controls, correct? I mean, it's not we're making it cumbersome where a couple $1,000 item needs to go all the way up to the city manager for his, yep, that's okay, go ahead and spend the money.
Well, that would be up to the city manager, but we hope not. We hope that we can take our existing controls and mirror that in the most efficient way we can. And right now we have a fairly distributed but very set hierarchy of approvals within the departments. The departments help us establish that. We meet with every department and say who should have approval. At what level should that be, both in dollar amounts and the types of items that they can buy. So each department participates in that, and we oversee it to make sure that it's consistent with the city policy.
You actually just said something that maybe we could come up with another question, which is with this budget module being implemented, are the rules around or the heuristics around the budgets and the approval process, are they integrated? Are they tied together? So, for example, if a budget or a department is starting to go over budget in a certain area, that there's some warning or some reporting that gets or notification that precludes them from being able to do that?
Right. There will be flags. We can establish flags at the individual line item level, to the group level, like operating and maintenance expenses, personnel expenses, capital outlay, and we can bring it up from there as well to make it at the division or budget unit level and the department level. So there'll be all those set of flags that will go off. Some we will allow overrides, such as on the object code level, because we're more interested in bottom line performance than we are whether they went over in office supplies $5 or under somewhere else.
Sure. And then a final question actually is somewhat related to Brad's questioning. Is there going to be the ability to, within Crystal Reports or some of the reporting tools, to be able to not only publish reports internally for internal use, but also be able to publish it to the web? And I guess maybe Brian would be the right person to talk to about whether or not that is actually in the roadmap for our website.
It is in the roadmap. I hate to use that phrase, but it is in the plan to be able to take our budget information and publish that onto the web for people to see. We have already, just in the last few months, put our comprehensive annual financial report, the CAFR. Now you've got me really struggling here to remember the acronyms myself, but we have that information available on the web, but we're also going to put our budget. That's a key priority for us.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a few questions myself. First one starts off with, you mentioned the Crystal Reports a couple of times. Did I get the idea that we have to buy more software for that to happen, or we already have that?
No, that's already in our package that we purchased.
Good, okay.
As well as training for that. It's fairly intense in training.
How often does council get reports on where we are budget-wise? That happens once a year, obviously, when we set our budget, and then we get a mid-year update, and that's it for right now, correct?
Right. We also have done the financial status reports. Those have been approximately every 2 months, but we have used, instead of that report, we've come, like your January 9th budget report, you got a financial status report, you got financial status report built into that report. You will most likely, I haven't discussed it with the city manager, but most likely get another update in February at your workshop, your retreat on priority setting. And then we will do one more in the spring, and then it'll be budget time again. We will do one for your proposed budget document in late May, early June.
Well, my next question / comment, somewhat related to what Brad was saying earlier about something that would give us monthly reports. And that's why I asked the question about how often we get things now. It seems I kind of knew the answer, but I just wanted everybody to hear that. As I see it, the thing that's important, and again, I think this is where Brad was drilling down, is as a council, I think we have some priorities that we'd like to see in this whole program, that things that are important to us. I know you as staff have your things that you're interested in. You know, each department wants to be able to get reports for their department and projects within their department and so forth. I think what we're concerned about, I know I have been for 4 years, is, as I see it, there's 3 things that get budgeted. A fund, in other words, buckets that money sit in, and money comes out of those buckets to pay for various things. So there's sort of a fund budget, and then there's projects. And when we do special projects, like we just finished our Guello Park, we did Industrial Road, we did, downtown project, so forth. Special projects that have budgets to them. And then there are departments. And within the departments, there's usually identified by a fund, the different things that they have set up. And what's difficult for us is, for instance, when you look at the warrants, you can see that money's getting spent, and it has a little number next to it, but you have no idea what that number relates to unless you're really into it and want to study it, like I have done on occasion for certain things. And even once you find out what project that is, it's really difficult sometimes to go and find, okay, what's the budget on that project, and how the heck do I put this number together so I know where we are from month to month or even quarter to quarter on these budgets that we sit up here and we get a big 5-inch thick binder. Here's the budget. Work on it. Approve it. know it. Make some choices as a city council. So we go through that process. It's very painful. It's a lot of reading. And after you've done it, you feel like you kind of want to own that thing a little bit. And so you want to have some reports come back to you every once in a while. But it's so difficult because, again, you've got funds over here. I have no idea where things are going on funds. I've got a project. I don't get any reports on this project. I never know what's going on with the project unless I want to drill into it myself and study it and put together a spreadsheet, which Richard, I've done on occasion. Mm-hmm. Right. And then there's the departments. Never even paid attention to what the departments are doing. Are they on budget or off budget? I have no idea. This, I think, would be really helpful if this system could track that sort of thing for us so that once we've read a 5-inch binder and approved a budget, we could look at something at a report that would say, here's where the money was spent, here's where you are, here's how much you have left over. You're either fine or you're not fine. And then if we need to put the brakes on something as a council and say, you know what, we missed the mark on this or we want to slow down on this, we can make that decision. Right now, we're like driving in a snowstorm and it's white out. We can't even see where the heck we're going. And now I know, I don't mean to belittle staff. We depend on you a lot for these kinds of things, but we have gotten into trouble on things here and there, and it's because we don't have this kind of reporting. So, with all that said, I'm looking at this enhanced reporting, Crystal Reports, estimated completion date on or before June 30th, 2006. I think that's a really good target, and I think we should stay on with that target so that when we go into a new budget year, which starts July 1, perhaps we could start this process of actually having a handle on things and being able to see what's going on. So those are my, I guess I didn't even have a question in there, did I?
I'm sorry?
I didn't have a question in there. It was all comment.
Matt,
but
actually, you bring up a really good point, which is, I think that we as a council, maybe independently, should just email Richard with what our expectations are as it relates to reporting against budget, because I know from having worked a lot on city council that oftentimes you can't just take a snapshot and say that's exactly where we are today, because there may be funds out there or invoices waiting to be paid or amounts being withheld because of like in Public Works, withholding 10% to make sure that the work meets our standards. So I think we ought to be clear about the frequency of the reporting, because I don't want to, because we've missed the appropriate time frame on some of these actuals versus budget reporting, that we indeed think that there may be problems where there are none, or that we may miss problems where we may have should be picking up on them. So I would like to see more exception reporting rather than necessarily the everything's fine type of reporting, because we all have enough paper to read, and I guess I would look to you and to the rest of the finance department as well as the city manager's office to let us know where to focus our energies as a council when it comes to where we are versus budget, what the year is looking like versus budget. I think staff's done an excellent job in terms of some of the quarterly updates that you've provided back to this council.
okay, I think that concludes that item. Is that correct?
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions or comments from council? No? All right. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, which is public comment. And we have a number of speaker slips here for public comment. First one is Ginny Maloney.
Good evening. My name is Ginny Maloney, and I have a piece of property at 1055 Laurel. Our parking lot empties out onto the back side where the thrift center is, the alley, I'll call it for better. We need some kind of help back there because of the traffic. It's gotten to be a real hot spot. There's a lot of fights, people very unhappy about trying to get through there. Cars will park or trucks will park there at the thrift center trying to unload, and then others trying to get around them. And we try to leave our parking lot, and a man the other night insisted I exit out through the Chinese restaurant. They're not very happy. So we need a municipal code posted, or we need the thrift center to post no parking, no loading, no standing. The Chinese food, they're going to have to do their own signage because they don't have parking spots for their customers because of the thrift center parking in there. And they're really tearing up their surface of the parking surface. And we're all cutting, including myself, through necessary to get through the Shell station. The blockage can back up as far as the El Camino because they're trying to get in and out of that narrow space, and so they cut through the gas station. Or one even went over the sidewalk. I'd personally like to see an exit out onto Laurel from the thrift centers because I've seen people cut over the sidewalk to get out there. Now that they can't go all the way through in the end with the Salvatore's, I know I believe in the planning, a street that's going to be there where the nursery was. I think you're having an exit plan for there. So you're going to have an out eventually in years to come. Why can't they put one over the sidewalk out onto Laurel to empty their parking lot? It's very testy with people as they jockey back and forth and tempers are flying.
Okay, thank you. Staff, you're taking notes. I'm going to ask a question of staff regards this issue, and I'll ask it of Bob. We've had the alley in place from one end of town to the other for quite some time. When's the last time we ever looked at policies and legal matters regarding the alley in terms of parking, leaving it being, that you can drive through it, what it's to be used for, deliveries, et cetera? And could we have that brought to the council at some point in the not-too-distant future to look at that matter?
Well, I think your latter comment is appropriate. We can bring that back to the council. I know we just went through the circulation element a year or so ago, and I think alleys was part of that. But we can bring back a more detailed report to the council, and staff can meet with the speaker and address the problem individually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Also, item 5 is Pat Bell.
Pat Bell, San Carlos, still. I'm here to ask for more transparency in government, more citizen involvement. It would be a lot easier to be involved and informed if we had more information about the agenda before the meeting. I signed up for the notification for SBWMA, which I don't have to define, right? Already been done. And they send out a lot of information about the stuff that's on the agenda. And I've asked for this before, and it hasn't happened yet. I'd like to see that happen. And I'd like to have reports from the departments similar to what council members do, saying, I went to this meeting, and here's what happened, and we're still working on, synchronizing the lights on El Camino or whatever the heck it is. From city departments, instead of referring something to a city department and hearing nothing until it comes back to council for a vote. I mean, it winds its way through commissions and staff and whatever. I'd like for the departments to say, we're still working on what you referred to us last month, and here's what we're doing, and we don't have any results to report, but here's where we are in the process. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I think that completes public comment. Moving on to item 6,
Honorable.
which is approval of the consent
Mr. Mayor,
calendar.
just wondering,
Excuse me?
given where we are with the agenda, if it might be possible to make a switch in the agenda and consider the park fund issue. We have a consultant in the audience who I understand has a plane to catch. So if we could move it up in the agenda, it would be helpful to staff.
Okay, which item is that then?
Item 7A.
7A. Yes, yeah, I saw that. I know. Okay. That's fine with me, so we can hold off on the approval of the consent calendar. And I know I had a couple of items to pull on there, so yeah, I would rather.
Pleasure of the council, yes.
Yeah. Anybody have a problem with that? No? Okay. We will move on to, we'll come back to item 6 later and after finishing item 7A.
That's all to West Virginia.
Right.
Thank you very much for adjusting the agenda. Appreciate
No problem.
it. We also have many people from the community here and support, that have helped work on this, and so I appreciate it. Thank you. We are asking for your consideration of the proposed alternative fund development program, and I just wanted, before I introduce the speaker, to highlight a few things. This is a business plan for raising money for Parks and Recreation. And I think more importantly, we're coming with a proposed solution to what we anticipate will be an ongoing budget issue, not just this year and next, but ongoing. So we're delighted to bring what we think is a solution. Also, I should know that it is a long-range plan, not a short-range plan, but what time better to start than now? And we can look back in a while and say we're glad we started. Our community wants enhanced facilities, programs, and services. This is a plan to help provide those enhancements, those additions, without increasing our general fund support. It's a strategic, comprehensive approach, and I, for one, like that. I think it's the kind of thing that we need to be doing. In fact, it may be the most important thing we do in Parks and Recreation in San Carlos for the next 5 years. In the proposal, we're asking for approval of the Alternative Fund Development Program. Mr. Kegler will speak to that in a minute. We're asking for implementation approval of the new San Carlos Parks and Recreation Foundation. And we're asking council to direct staff to return at a later date for consideration of the other individual program components, where we've had a chance to work out significant policies and procedures for your consideration for each of the components. At this point, I would like to introduce the advisory task force that I mentioned in the report to help us put together the proposed foundation, the draft MOU you have in front of you, the bylaws, and to help identify potential trustees. We had an outstanding group of San Carlos citizens advise us on that and worked several months with us on that. So at this point, I'd like to recognize them. If they could stand and be recognized, please, the people that worked on that. They did an outstanding job. There's real talent there. And so I appreciate all of your help very much. Also, the staff is committed to this. We have a separate fund development team. If I could have the staff stand, please, that are involved in this. And no, you don't have to give any speeches either. We're also missing a couple tonight, that other staff that were involved. So I appreciate their support also. At this point, I will turn over to Mr. Bill Kegler from the Kegler Consulting Group, who is the guru across the nation on this, and I will let him talk to you and explain the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barry. And thank you. You probably have, Council and Mr. Mayor, you probably have heard that excuse before about catching a plane later, and but I do appreciate that.
How many, too many planes to West Virginia, right?
West Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
Then I have to drive. Thank you very much, and audience, thank you, and especially the people that have helped and have been in some of the meetings that we've had. I've enjoyed being here in San Carlos. What I'm going to do is do a quick overview of the plan that council received, I think earlier this week, and then we'll try to leave as much time for questions as possible. And I do have time. The plan that we're putting together is based on the fact that the Parks and Recreation agencies across the country are having the same problem as San Carlos, in that most city governments, county governments, state governments, and including the national government, first cut goes to Parks and Recreation agencies. This has unfortunately been the history of Parks and Recreation since the early 1920s. When times are good, Parks and Recreation agencies are funded. When times are tough, they're usually the first thing that go. And the quality of life of the people of the community are based on what I feel is Parks and Recreation and leisure. So I'm passionate about ensuring Parks, Recreation, and Leisure. This entire program is nothing new. It is something that is being done at the state-supported foundation level and state-supported universities at the foundation level across the country. Universities have had foundations and alternative funding since the early 1800s. And what we're doing now is taking the university concept to Parks and Recreation agencies, small and large, across the country. So that's what we're doing with the program. The solution that we're looking at is our Alternative Revenue Programs Private Sector Assistance, PSA. Quickly, the Ogilvie story, and most of you have heard this, or some of you have heard this. I come from Ogilvie in Wheeling, West Virginia, a park system since 1925 that has 2,000 acres, 85 facilities, 1,000 employees, the same size city as this city, 30,000 people. Our park system receives no tax support and has never received tax support. We're the only self-sustaining park system in the United States. We have established a foundation system since 1946 and recently re-engineered that in the mid-1990s to the Ogilvie Foundation for Everyone Forever. And a number of small communities and now larger communities are looking at the same concept across the country. We currently have a $100 million goal in our foundation. And we have about $40 million booked, and we're working on a new $35 million campaign, of which we have raised about $30 million, and we have 1 year left to go in a community the same size as this. It takes effort. It takes a plan. It is, as Barry said, a long-term solution, although sometimes short-term money comes very quickly. In the United States, the annual foundation grants given by public and private foundations is about $25 billion. Parks and recreation agencies receive less than 1/2% of that, 1/2%, leaving $10 billion on the table. We qualify for that money. The San Carlos Parks and Recreation Department, which I've been looking at over the past 8 or 9 months, and I did an assessment with the help of the advisory committee and staff, I can tell you that you do have cutting-edge leadership. And I'm not going to pat Barry on the back very much, but he is on the National Academy of Parks and Recreation Directors, top 100 Parks and Recreation Directors in the country, that they are talking about the cutting-edge subjects. And I have spoken twice to that group about foundation development for their organizations. He's also a past president of the state of California Parks and Recreation Agency. He understands some of the new cutting-edge opportunities. They also understand, the staff does, that we're going to have a specialist on staff or working for the new foundation to make this work. And we will look in the new plan at how we can fund that specialist, either through a combination of city or private funds. They realize that there's a tremendous potential. They understand that there are political drawbacks if we do not form a private vehicle. They recognize that there is also a corporate sponsorship potential, and that this community does have a strong history of philanthropy. The needs in the process that we went through, we did, and I'm very happy to have the Community Advisory Task Force here that helped us identify the vehicle that's available, which saved us time. We were talking about time and planning tonight. They are in the process of being prepared to recommend trustees if this council goes forward with this program, and they've provided advice and counsel throughout this process. We're looking at developing a foundation, the San Carlos Parks and Recreation Foundation, and its purpose would be to support the mission and vision of the Parks and Recreation Department, market the alternative fund program once it's in place, acquire funds as designated for development and endowment, and receive charitable contributions. At a minimum, you'll have a vehicle to accept charitable contributions. Now you get calls and you do take charitable contributions, but you don't have the vehicle and the process in place. You don't have the plan in place. The foundation would also establish, maintain, manage, and invest all the endowments, provide a mechanism for the city to be eligible for funding from other nonprofits. Most city governments, county governments, and political situations do not receive many private foundation grants because of the political nature of the body. And the foundation would conduct a capital campaign to support the identified segments of the program. The Parks Foundation would be a non-political entity to facilitate the program, a 501c3. We have identified, with the help of staff and with the city attorney, the Downtown Park Association, which currently has fulfilled its need and goal, and those trustees have indicated that we could modify, with the help of the city attorney, modify that instrument to become the San Carlos Parks and Recreation Foundation with a little bit of work. The bylaws have been looked at. And currently, I think we can move forward with that pretty quickly if we get approval from you. A memorandum of understanding, an MOU, would be the working relationship between the foundation and city council. And a current draft has been worked on by staff and by legal counsel and the advisory committee. That would be the link between the foundation and council that would give you the authority, since you are the owner, the city is the owner of all these properties, that would give direction to the foundation. Key ingredient that is necessary in all foundation and fundraising is a master plan. We need a plan and know where we are going. The staff has been instrumental in the last 4 to 6 months in developing many master plans for different areas of the park systems, which I think they're bringing to you for approval. San Carlos does have a wide variety of programs and facilities that lend themselves to different funding vehicles, and I've looked at that. You have a multitude of opportunities. You have priority programs and facilities. You have certain ideal candidates that we've looked at, and there's a litany of these in the report of different parks and programs and so forth that I won't go into, but you can look in the report. You have individual neighborhood and community parks that would be looked at for vehicles with naming rights, presentation sponsorships, specific facilities, rooms and programs that could be endowed or used in other vehicles. Private sector assistance. We're talking about bringing the private sector into the community through the foundation vehicle and funding projects within the city, both in maintenance-type projects, new projects, and endowing those projects for the future. It would be a source of dollars. You've been talking tonight about spending dollars. We're looking on the Parks and Recreation side at finding outside dollars to support the budget. Alternative fund categories that we would look at, legacy endowments. Most of you understand these and are aware of these. This is where somebody would give a large gift for a naming rights of a building such as the library or the community center, where somebody would give a large endowment gift, as they do at a foundation or at a university, to support that building or that facility or that program for a period of time that can be defined. I'm recommending a lifetime naming would be 100 years, because I don't plan on living that long, and many of us, some of us do, but I think a 100-year plan versus the plan of forever makes a lot more sense, and then we don't tie the hands of the next generation. They normally come from individuals, but many come from foundations. And what we would have the foundation dedicate the principal of those gifts, hold those in dedicated line item trusts, and the income would come back to support the facilities. The best use would be for new capital projects with replacement, enhancement, endowment, some existing facilities with replacement and enhancement endowment, and endowing general operating of programs, certain programs that you have. We have a gifting formula that we'll be working with the staff that identifies and looks at benchmarks nationally, although there aren't that many. We look at some national benchmarks, but we would look at what we feel that would be the best opportunity and gifting rate that we could put on a building or a facility or program. Potential facilities could be the Adult Community Center, City Hall Park, the Youth Center, community parks, the library. We are also going to put into this plan the opportunity to have corporate naming rights. Now, this might raise a red flag with some. When we put this into the program, that doesn't mean that you have to approve every section of the program. We hope you would. We'll take a look at it, but you may say, well, to begin with, we may want to do endowments and not necessarily do corporate naming rights. I can tell you, though, that our society is going into corporate naming rights. They're doing it in universities, they're doing it in public settings, and they're doing it in parks. And there are opportunities there for short-term money. Corporate naming rights are short-term money, 1 to 10 years. And there is possibility of adding dollars into the general operating budget of the Parks and Recreation Department with short-term gifts. They would support possibly operating costs, facility improvements, expansion programs, and usually are a negotiated fee. Certain priority facilities, and you'll notice that I've put the library happens to be on both these, and some of the community center happens to be on both these. And the concept is to have a spreadsheet that would say the library, if somebody was interested in a permanent naming, might be $2 to $5 million. But if they were interested, if that didn't happen to be in the cards at this moment, somebody might be interested in a corporate naming rights for the library or the community center for a shorter period of time for a smaller dollar, but not as a long-term endowment. So there are ways to negotiate this and move that forward. let me go back to, oh, I missed one. Excuse me. Many corporate sponsorships are available for programs, and you already have a successful history of having corporate sponsorships for some of your musical programs and outdoor programs in the summer. And they can be as small as $1,500. Some of them can be larger for long-term sponsorship. You can develop a comprehensive plan for each program and then put a dollar figure on it. This is all about planning. Many times, at the last moment, somebody will come in and knock on your door and say, we want to sponsor the programs this summer. And then we scramble as a staff and in a community and say, well, what's it worth? At least in this situation, if we move forward, you'll have a plan, and you'll have the opportunity to establish those parameters. Certain examples would be the Highland Park, presented by the Hiller Air Museum, the Henry Nissen Room, presented by Nectar Therapeutics, and Greg Nannerone Field, presented by Gatorade. You have named things throughout your park system, as every park system has, many times in honor of someone. And you don't want to change those names or change that intent. But you have the opportunity to upgrade those facilities, put the frosting on the cake, by having somebody provide additional dollars. Presentation sponsorships, very short-term naming rights, presented by, for maybe $25,000 to $150,000, through individuals, businesses, civic groups. Many times Rotary will take on a presentation sponsorship, or Kiwanis will present a picnic shelter, and that's a national historical fact. And so those kinds of things can be worked through with the foundation. And priority facilities, again, can be some of the same ones. I'm going in the wrong direction. And one area that I have put forth is I looked at the park right outside this building, and we talked about possibly a citywide wall of fame, which will allow the community to give dollars towards a wall of fame to put their plaque or their name, but it would also allow City Council the opportunity with no gift, but just community service, to honor people at the same area. So it doesn't tie your hands. It allows you to have that opportunity. There's a significant potential for this overall endowment through the Wall of Fame, I think, of a couple $1 million. And that would produce, and I keep talking about when you put that in endowment, 4 to 5% on an annual basis into the operating funds or designated funds that the Parks and Recreation Department would look towards. You also have a number, as every Parks and Recreation Department does in the country, a number of pieces of property that probably don't fit into the strategic plan of the Parks and Recreation Department, that have been given to you by developers, that have been given to you by through estates that people think my area would make a great park, and it may be inaccessible, it may not fit into the plan, it may be very expensive to develop. There is the opportunity with the foundation to possibly liquidate some of those areas, sell those, put those into endowments in the foundation, and or purchase other property that is much better suited to parkland. So you can shift those kinds of monies. Goes fast, doesn't it? The conclusion, which I've lost the space there. My clicker I use left and right, and that one's in the reverse. Oh, it's up. What we'd like you to do is what Barry asked for the first time. Tonight, what we're talking about, the plan that we presented to you and sent to you, if the plan gets approved to move forward, we're talking about working and establishing the foundation, moving forward and appointing trustees, working up a template of a policy and procedures manual that we would bring back to you on a piece-by-piece basis so that you have approval on each section of the policy and procedure manual. And it would also allow us to start towards the developing of a gift catalog and campaign with the foundation trustees. We need these interlocking agreements so that the trustees have the opportunity to support you. And you all understand that these trustees will be volunteers. They're here to help raise dollars for the Parks and Recreation community in San Carlos. And I was pleased to hear that earlier when, it is really a testimony to this organization and to this community that you had 14 people apply for a non-paying, unless you're paying for that park commissioner's position. Most people don't. 14 people apply for a non-paying position that is a lot of work is a testimony to the fact that the people of this community really are interested in their Parks and Recreation Department. And I think this program and this plan will help bring about the completion of master plans and projects that the community would like to have. And I throw that open to questions, and I'm sorry that I didn't do the PowerPoint as well as I could have.
I saw that Barry stepped in and helped you out.
He cleaned it up. He does good, he follows me around and cleans me up.
Okay, questions?
Question regarding the ongoing operation. The trustees would be a certain set number, or is that to be determined?
There is a set of bylaws that we're working on that would be modified with the current foundation, and there would be a range of trustees, and I think it's 5 to 15. That you can name a certain amount. It's always an odd number. There's a minimum and there's a maximum. I will say this, that once the foundation is established, it becomes a public foundation, and they have the opportunity to modify those bylaws. The mission, vision, and codicils of their original 501c3, the charter, they cannot modify without, they can, but it's a major project. They can modify those bylaws, but in general, it'd be 5 to 15.
So are the first appointments by the council?
We are asking the advisory committee that we have been working with to present a slate of trustees that would be requested, and I would assume, are you bringing that to council?
Under advice of council, because this body is a political body and the city is a political entity, and we wanted to separate that as much as possible. So the advisory task force has identified potential trustees, and we would just appoint them and go with that. And we've picked the number at 7, between 5 and 15.
Who would appoint them, Barry? Who actually appoints the trustees? The advisory council?
I believe that the technical appointment would be done by the existing foundation.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, this is not a city commission or board. This is individual. So we, as council, if we didn't approve this, this foundation could still go forward within the community. But what we're doing, or what we're being asked to do, is to more endorse the concept of a foundation here within San Carlos. So this isn't under city council control, is my understanding.
Correct. What we're asking for is for approval of staff, for you to direct staff to go ahead and make that happen. If you chose not to, the foundation could create itself. The difference would be there'd be no memorandum of understanding between them and the city typically, and they'd go do whatever they want. So we're trying to get a foundation that will support Parks and Recreation.
So the same question. How do the trustees get appointed? Who determines who is going to be a trustee?
I'm sorry, Tom, through the what?
Who determines who the trustees are? How does that get done?
The advisory task force working with staff has identified people.
Right.
That if we get approval tonight to move ahead, we will go out and contact them and ask them to be trustees.
And they will sign up, and then they're trustees.
Correct.
Okay.
And they would be controlled by the bylaws of the foundation.
That's correct. Right. And actually, I think that the original foundation, the members of that foundation would be the appointee. Is that correct?
Right. Once the initial board of directors is appointed for the foundation, that board of directors will take care of its successors.
A follow-up question, Bill, regarding the expenses of the operation. Will staff basically cover the cost of the manpower to do this, or will there be a budget for staff under the foundation?
What I'd like to see happen, obviously it's going to cost money to raise these dollars. Initially, there are a number of ways the foundation can look to fund itself through requesting grants from other foundations. They take longer. You can apply for operating grants from other foundations. I think the best option is to have staff assist in any way they can. And the big question is an executive director, whether or not the city would assist in funding for a year or two or putting seed money in. We'll come back with suggestions. But eventually, hopefully on a short-term basis, the foundation would be handling all of its own expenses out of taking a published percentage of a gift and saying that we're using 3, 4, 8%, whatever that is, of every gift, which most foundations do, for operating. And all of their reports, talking about reports this evening, are all public reports that are accessible. So the foundation would be self-sustaining shortly, we would hope, and that would not be a drain. Now, it is going to take, and you have a dedicated staff that wants it to work, it's going to take that interrelationship of staff support.
Sure.
And now there are ways, and I think I mentioned this at one of the first presentation I did, of establishing, even if council, one creative way would be if council wanted to hire someone on staff and lend them to the foundation and create an accounts receivable that somewhere down the road the foundation would pay you back. I think that would work. But I'll defer all those kinds of questions to this table at some point when it gets in that deep. But I think that will work.
Okay, thank you.
We'll see what they come back with.
So I heard your presentation before as a Park and Rec Commission member, and I mean, I think it's a fabulous concept. So and it's impossible not to get excited about this when you look through all the different things. So knowing that I mean, I really like the concept, I really like the idea. But I still have a bunch of questions.
Sure.
So there's whenever I think you're in a position where you're sort of giving control to some, it's an issue of control to a certain extent between the foundation and the city. And so, how do you adjudicate that when you're sort of saying, it's like a blind trust or something where it's going to go off and, you're going to do stuff to the city that we don't like. That's the, the sort of concern. And I know that the memorandum of understanding sort of the ideas that will clarify what the mission statement is and all of that. So is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So I'm going to sort of bore down and ask some questions and so forth, and they sort of take on a protecting the downside thing.
Okay.
So I just want to sort of state my optimism about the program up front, because I think it can really work. That being said, when there's disagreements, you've seen different examples of this. You have a fabulously successful one at Ogle Bay.
Sure.
Am I pronouncing that right?
That's correct.
Is it working well with the city officials and the foundation? Would everybody sign up and do it all over again if they had to do it? So I guess I want to know generally, is it a pretty happy working group? And then when you have disagreements, how do you arbitrate disagreements?
Well, the long term, they're extremely happy. Short term was far enough back that I don't know in the startup. I know that their concern at that time, we were a small community that could not afford a gentleman's farm that was given to us. And they basically said, we don't want it. The city council turned down an 850-acre farm because they couldn't afford it. So they were very excited about looking at alternative ways of funding it at that time, so they established this. I think where you're coming from, and I know that there are other communities that struggle with this concept, the property we are talking about, what we're asking you to do is give permission to name in general. You're giving the foundation permission through a memorandum of understanding. You have the final say. I mean, when it comes down to it, when the Parks and Recreation Commission, through their alternative fund program that they give to the foundation, will say, these are the facilities and programs that we are interested in naming. These are off limits at the moment. We may add these at another time. And these are the kinds of things. And the important thing is, this is the amount of money that we will do as long as it meets the criteria of the naming, that it fits in, it's in keeping with the mission and vision. The important thing is that once you do that and give the foundation permission to go out and sell your capital campaign, that you don't renege, which you could, and if you do, they won't be there. I mean, that's basically what will happen. It will dissolve. There will be a foundation that's not actively working. And there are a number of those that have been created throughout the country that they've created. The worst you can do right now is create the vehicle, and there's no downside. From this point forward is where we start putting the nuts and bolts together and tying it all together, and this is where it has to be, we have to really tie it down. And I understand your concern. I can just tell you this, that anything that we're dealing with is owned by the city. The final decisions of cities. But we want to work out a really good working relationship, so the foundation is out there looking for funds, and it's through the memorandum of understanding. But the final say is, if you don't give them anything to name, if they become very powerful in 20 years, and we're picking strong community people, and they have some unrestricted gifts, it goes back to their mission and vision that they must use them for the park system. The biggest battle you'll have is, and this happens, is that we've got a gift of $8 million from an estate from a local resident that wants to build a park here, and it's not in the park's master plan. So it's a good battle, but it can be a battle. We're not going to spend it here, and I don't think that the foundation will be I think to begin with, they're going to be supporting your master plans, and you want interaction. I suggest having the director of the Parks and Recreation as ex officio. We want open communication. So I think those kinds of things will work towards it.
Are there other city officials that are typically involved in these boards? I remember you had mentioned something about that before, and I wasn't sure.
Typically, no elected official.
Right.
And not saying anything about elected officials.
But you emphasize that. No.
I emphasize that. Typically, no elected official sits on a foundation board because of potential conflicts of interest and so forth.
But a Park and Rec Commission member or?
That's a Park and Rec Commission member is a volunteer, yes. Well, they could. The staff member is staff bringing communication. Now, they're non-voting. I would recommend non-voting unless they were appointed to that. Right. I think the foundation would be their voting. The ex officio members are there for communication.
So there's a lot of work that we need to do on the Park and Rec in the city to really focus, from what you say, really focus what we're willing to name and willing to commit to, and then say we're willing to commit to these things, now go get them.
That's right. That's
right.
Basically, in a nutshell.
But we need to be pretty diligent about
absolutely
actively managing that list.
And it's something that you would. It's something you would probably do annually. That you would review the list, and we would make it concise. And here's the list you approved last year: 2 or 3 additions, or 2 or 3 subtractions, and you would give them a parameter. Now, that doesn't mean the foundation may come back to you and say, we've got some ideas about how we can raise other monies, and it's just good interaction.
On the naming rights front, I think for me the downside fear is that you can't walk 2 feet without seeing presented by or a corporate naming right, and I think culturally it's a little sad and to a certain extent that everything can be named. Although I have a lot of forehead space and I'd be willing to tattoo that for a price.
It's 2 of us.
But it's sort of a how do we control naming rights? Can we build?
You decide.
Okay, so we can build some limits into it.
Absolutely. This program can be that we have 6 facilities that we would like to, and they make sense. The library, libraries have been named forever. The Carnegie libraries were the first. I mean, Carnegie gave all these libraries and they put his name on them, and so yes, it's your control.
So we can kind of walk before we run.
Absolutely, and I would recommend that, and that's what we're going to bring back to you. That we come back with we're not going to come back with a naming opportunity and a price on every. I show the litany of things that are possible.
Right.
But we would come back with certain priorities that the foundation could. We want success, and we don't, and we want to give them opportunities, and there will be a bench program, and some of those kinds of things.
So it sounds like we have an opportunity to sort of figure out where we fit in culturally to this trend.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you can deny, as I said, it may be that legacy endowments and naming rights for legacy endowments, which are very common, is something you want to do, and you may not want to do corporate naming rights to begin with. You may not want to do presentation sponsorships. Right. We don't do corporate naming rights. We do presentation sponsorships. So that's, but we've been successful with endowments, and I can't tell you, if we were starting today, I think we'd probably do corporate naming rights, but that's just based on, where we're at. And those are decisions that you will make.
Are some of the other cities you've been involved with, do we have an opportunity to have them help mentor us as a foundation or a city or whatever?
I Barry knows some of the people, and I'll be able to pass those on. El Paso, Texas is doing it now. Jim Niskanen in Modesto, California is actively doing it, and he's looking at naming rights. They have some different situations. They actually have a civic center that they have hired a firm to do naming rights.
Actually, that leads to my final question was, how successful is this in other cities, and then in general that are actively doing it? And then Modesto in particular, because they're California, and how long ago did they start?
They've been in it a year and a half. now since I finished the project. And I was just with Jim Niskanen and he has a number of small successes. And as Barry said, this is long term. The big gifts normally come 10, 15, 20 years from now. That doesn't mean, though, that once you're established that you might not get one in a year or two. They're actively looking and moving forward. Most of the successes are in old-time parks conservancies, which are the New York Central Park Conservancy, the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy, and those are similar to what we're talking about. We're just taking it to a smaller level. Most small communities haven't done it. Right. I mean, you're in the top. I know of 8 or 10 small communities have done this, and that's all. Right. So you're going to be on the front end of the successful curve.
Right. Well, thank you very much. It's great stuff.
Bob? No questions? Inga? I just have a few questions, kind of related to what Brad was saying, and I think you've covered it for the most part, but I was also thinking about the push-pull, if you will, between the city council and the foundation, and I'll put it a little differently. Have you seen any difficulty with, master plan or not, foundation sitting out here with a bunch of money and they want to put in a pool, but the community's not quite ready for a pool? I'm just throwing out an example. Sure. And they want that pool, and they want it located in this spot. And, it's kind of the old adage, the guy with the money's got the power, right? So I could see a little bit of push-pull, I'll call it, between the council, what we may see as city leaders versus the
I think that
endowment program.
I agree with you, except I'd say at the beginning you have the opportunity to sit with a new foundation board and say, here's our master plan, and we're asking you to support our mission and vision, and we're the experts in location and development and facilities and the new facilities. We want you to help us raise money for our master plans and our. Now that doesn't mean that what you said isn't going to happen somewhere down the road, that they come in with a chunk of money. Legally, they have to give you the money at some point. I mean, and you will have to look towards hopefully your master plan, and maybe they may end up with a decent idea, but normally they're going to be raising money. First, you don't have to give them naming rights for that, because it's not if it's something they've developed on their own, you can say that's not in our master plan. I would suggest you sit down with them and say, and we've done this with other donors. If somebody's come in and wanted something that was totally off the charts, that wasn't on our master plan, we said, let's talk to the donor and see if there isn't something that's in our current master plan or something that can be modified to have that gift go here versus something that wouldn't. So I'm not going to tell you it won't happen, but I think your chances of that happening early on, I don't think will happen in a new situation. I think that would be down the road when they get a major gift. But again, bottom line is the gift has to come to you because of the way it's being structured at some point for Parks and Recreation.
My other question, if you've had any experience with this, where, right now our Parks and Rec is governed, if you will, like a governor on a carburetor, by the funds they get through our general fund and through our ability to tax and so forth. Mm-hmm. So now here comes, this other funding source. I could see the thing growing and getting bigger, and because it got bigger over here from the endowment funds, so does our staffing and everything else has to also grow, and yet there's nothing there to pay for it.
Endowment funds can pay for operations. I mean, absolutely, they can pay for operations, they can pay for your programs. The concept is to benchmark. One thing we don't want council to do is to lower your percentage of dollars that are coming in out of your general fund to the Parks and Recreation Department. Taking the staff side, usually the Parks and Recreation Department is saying, City Council is going to say this is great, and all of a sudden all this money is coming in, and we're going to take half their budget and take it over and give it to police or to fire and so we want you to benchmark and say there's a certain level that the city will commit to, and we want to stay at that. Anything else is frosting on the cake. Any project that comes in has to have a feasibility study and a pro forma, and the pro forma could be that this new zoo they want to build and we've got an endowment for the buildings, we can't afford the operation. Then you have to endow the operation. And that's something you go back to them and say, we can't afford as a city to staff this. But we will if the foundation has a dedicated endowment. And those are good negotiations to have. If you can have facilities that you don't have to pay a penny for or pay a penny to operate, I think it's just, I think we're all thinking how great this will be, and I think it will be in maybe 20 or 25 years. And I think they're all good problems to have. I don't see it being an animal that can't be managed by council. I really don't.
Last question is, in your community, you said the park is completely, Parks and Rec is completely self-sustaining. I don't know how
do you
you
do
be
that?
honest about the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways.
Sure.
I know, I'm an alum to a private high school and an alum to a college, and quite frankly, I get tired sometimes of, I think we all do. You get the letter in the mail asking for more money and so forth. Can you speak to the aspect of people just get tired of
Well, I think what's going
fundraising and on both sides of, going and getting the money and then the other person at the other end sitting there being asked? Do you find that or?
Oh, sure. No question. What's interesting, though, is as we grow older, and I'm getting to that point, and depending on your family situation, I'm talking about big gifts. Even though you may have given, some of our biggest givers have given $25 or not giving me anything. They like the park, but here's the things that need done. But when it comes to a certain point in their life and they start to look at what they've done and what monies they have to distribute and who they have to distribute it to, if you've been good to them, they don't mind being asked. And I think you see that in universities and foundations and so forth. I'm not saying that this, I think what we're going to offer is a Friends of the Park group. I'm sure the foundation is going to offer a Friends of the Park at a very small amount of money that will allow people to become involved and get newsletters and know programs and improve a very good operation, improve it and take it a step higher. And those people can join that, and that will be the only small gift they ask for. Others will be corporate. They'll be looking at businesses. They'll be looking at long-term estate gifts that somebody's going to give to somebody. My concept in this is that if somebody is going to distribute their estate, think about Parks and Recreation as well as hospitals and as well as universities. And I'm right now, as in a certain state of life, we all get tired of fundraisers and buying tickets, and I do as well. I don't see this foundation doing those kinds of fundraising. I really see them looking to the bigger picture. Now, they can change when they become trustees and so forth, but I don't see them doing door-to-door or I think the capital campaign we're talking about is looking at larger chunks rather than the typical, we're not going to do a phone call solicitation. You graduated in 1962, and we want to get you on the alumni list. That when I use universities, I'm talking about the larger picture, the big picture.
Okay. I should have preempted my questions with, anytime a program like this comes to you and say, hey, here's a way to increase your cash flow and get some money and ease up on your general fund. It seems like a good thing. So I was trying to think of things that I think like Brad did, okay, this looks great, but what could be the possible potholes in the road down?
And I appreciate that, and I really think that there'll be bumps and there won't be holes. I think that we will work through with your assistance, with the department's assistance, and giving guidance. And I've been the advisory task force of the community that they put together understands, and they have been very good. Everybody that I've been involved with in this community feels that there are dollars out there that to assist the Parks and Recreation Department in putting what I'm calling the frosting on the cake. If you've got a great facility, let's make it better, and assist the city in if you're in your general fund projects, but not sort of cut back where you're funding at the moment.
Thank you. Council, before we deliberate on this, we have a couple of members from the public who would like to speak to us. Bonnie McClure, followed by Sandra Menton. Should have said Sandra Menton before Bonnie because Sandy's sitting on the outside.
Bonnie McClure, San Carlos. This is something that I've looked forward to for years, that foundation would be started for the parks. I'm not the kind of person that has rich friends, nor do I have the personality to go out and glad hand somebody for funds. And to me, it's just, I'm just so excited that Barry's gone ahead and started this. And I hope that you will concur and make it happen, because it's been a long, long time. It's very hard when, well, personally, when my husband died, I mean, it was very hard to say, well, donations, please give to the city of San Carlos. Well, people don't like to give to the city because they think it's going to go right in the general fund. And now people will be able to give. It's not much, but if you get enough people, and over the years you appreciate it. It's just like we who have lived here and our kids have gone to schools here, we give to the educational fund. They're not in school anymore, but your kids benefited from these schools. Well, look at all the people whose kids have benefited from the parks. So please, please do this.
Thank you, Bonnie. Sandy?
Sandra Minton, 66 Northam Avenue, San Carlos. I agree and heartily endorse the basic principles of the foundation for going out and obtaining money to help with projects for the city as regards our parks and recreation facilities and programs. I, for one, don't want my name on anything, and I would prefer that a wall of fame would be used to recognize individuals, community members, businesses, and corporations for their contribution to the community. I would prefer to see that recognition come through a prominent listing on the wall of fame rather than the naming rights to parks or facilities. The parks in San Carlos are often identified by where they are, Hillcrest Circle Park, Cedar Street Park. Also in San Carlos, two of the parks, Burton Park and Arguello Park, have historical names that are linked to the history of the city. And I would not want to see those, nor do I want the future citizens of San Carlos to see those names disappear. Often if a park is named by location, it's much easier to find it. If you're not familiar with the city, you can look at a map and you know where Cedar Street Park is, or you know where Hillcrest Circle Park is. Also, Vista Park, you have an idea that that's probably up on top of the hills or the ridge someplace. And again, the names of Burton Park and Arguello Park link us to our history. I would not like to see that link and location significance disappear. In concept, I again want to reiterate that I do support the idea of going out and recruiting funds for this foundation. And I do think, not having any professional experience but some personal experience, that estates are a very significant way of obtaining this money. It takes a long period of time because when you're talking to people in my age generation, age group, and they are doing their wills and trusts and so forth, they're looking for places to put their money. But hopefully we won't die in the near future, so it'll be 20 to 25 years before that money might become available. There are people older than I who I know personally are looking for places to put their money, and this would be one of the places they would want to put it. I would like to see that actively pursued, perhaps being even the first source of where the money comes from. Again, I appreciate the work that Barry and his department have done to put this foundation idea together, and I think it can be a workable vehicle for the city of San Carlos. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Okay, council.
Well, I'll start. Ever since you came and made that presentation, what was it, a year ago, or a little bit more. I've just been absolutely thrilled by the idea of having a foundation for Parks and Rec. I know we in San Carlos have a history of citizens getting together or local organizations getting together and seeing a need within San Carlos and finding a way to raise funds and address it. So I think this, the whole concept of a foundation fits really nicely into what San Carlos is about. It gives a lot of the people who may live in town the opportunity to donate. If they don't have the time to donate their time, they have the ability to donate in other ways. So I am very much in favor of the support of a foundation for our Parks and Rec here within San Carlos, understanding that, you know, I do want to maintain some level of control over. I mean, I would be opposed to seeing, you know, Christine and I were kind of laughing about it, you know, the Barry Bonds Adult Community Center or something like that. But, you know, something that is tasteful, that, you know, people within the community have the ability to give back. And, you know, I know when this first came up, you know, we were talking about, you know, does everything have to have a little plaque associated? We could just envision all these little plaques on, you know, everything from trash receptacles to park benches to, you know, trees. And I think I would not like that idea, but I think that between the Wall of Fame and the ability to have, you know, a tasteful plaque perhaps in some rooms, especially throughout some of the facilities here in town, is a great idea. So I would like to recommend that we move ahead with this and support this as a council within our community.
Before we do that, go ahead.
Oh, should I make a motion? I would move
Well-
approval of this concept of the Parks and Recreation Alternative Fund Development Program and authorize staff to implement the new San Carlos Parks and Rec Foundation, and also direct staff to develop a final MOU between the city and that foundation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I want to still continue it for further discussion. I think there might be some items we want to be clear on.
I'll just say, because I sort of said a little bit about my point of view and asked some questions already, but I do want to thank, you know, we talk a lot about staff working together with commission, working together with volunteer folks in the community and so forth, and this is a great example of people moving things along. And so I guess I just want to thank staff and Barry, Mr. Kogler, and the volunteers on the advisory committee and for getting this thing moving and putting it together. It's great to see.
I just wanted to say that you know, to me, it's a perfect example of a public-private partnership, how we built the youth center, of which I sit on the Youth Center Foundation. This is a bigger part of it, but it's an outgrowth of it. I think it's a great idea. I think to everyone's thoughts that Brad and Inga and Matt and Tom and I would probably all have that control thing that has to come back into it to make sure that the right things are done, so we don't put, like you said, a sticker on everything that moves or doesn't move. But I'm very much supportive and willing to vote for this proposal tonight.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Sorry, but I just wanted to clarify, as Councilmember Doherty read off the recommendation, the last part was directing staff to return at a later date with individual components.
Correct. No, I understood that. Yeah.
Okay.
So I
just want to make sure I'm clear on
The motion was to
direction.
direct you to develop a final MOU, which of course would have to come back before
Right.
this council or future council for approval.
And that would also include like policies on sponsorships, naming right.
Yeah,
Okay,
no, I understood all of that.
great. I just want to make sure I got it right. Thank
Okay.
you.
If you would stay there, I have a question. I want to make sure we do have it right. On items in our staff report on page 3, beginning on page 3, items that are action items 1 through 9, how will our motion tonight impact these items? These items will come back to us individually?
Well, the motion
The staff
tonight
report.
would
Please allow
authorize
Barry to
number
answer the
one,
question.
establishment of the foundation.
I'm sorry, there was chatter up here. I couldn't hear. what
Item
you were
number
saying.
1, you would authorize establishment of the foundation. Items 2 through 9, we would return to council. The
Okay.
first thing we'd return with is an MOU for your approval. You have a draft in your file, but that's a draft.
Right.
So we'd return with that first. Legacy giving would be our first priority after that, and then the others would follow, not necessarily in this order. Clearly, legacy would be the first. Then we'd come back one at a time with completely well-thought-out policies, procedures for your approval, and there's where your control comes in.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Christine, we've had a motion by Inga, second by Bob, and we can take a roll call.
Sure. Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Absolutely, yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Thank you.
Matt, do we want to continue on through new business and just close out that section and come back for?
No, we want to jump back to the consent calendar, and then we'll carry on in order after that. So what we're going to do, we took that out of order a little bit, and we are going to go back to the item that we skipped, which was the consent calendar, which is item 6 on our agenda, approval of the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be acted by one motion unless an item is pulled off separately for discussion by either staff or a council member or someone from the public.
I'm not actually going to pull an item, but I just would like to mention that there are some typos in the resolution for item 6F, and I'd just like to have those typos cleared up by staff before it gets passed.
Okay.
And I'll give Christine a copy of what those are.
All right. I wanted to actually
We caught him, yeah.
pull item 6C and 6F. So if we could have a
I
motion
would
for...
move approval of items, consent calendar items 6A, B, D, and E. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
You have a second?
Second.
Tom, second?
Through the chair, question. Through the city attorney, can I ask a question about these without having them pulled?
Sure.
I don't understand what D and E, and perhaps it's just I'm not sure what grammar it is. It says, like, let's say with D, this is a funded operating expense under an account number, appropriated at $75,000 for the current fiscal year, 2005-06, shared with the plan review consultant firm. I don't understand what that means. The next sentence then says 100% of the charges are charged to the applicant and recouped. I don't understand what that means. Jack, could you help me on that? Thank you.
Good evening. That account number is our general consultant account number. All of our consultants that we do use are under the same number. Okay. Approximately, last year as an example, approximately $60,000 of that $75,000 went to the soils consultant that we use. Approximately $15,000 went to the plan check consultant.
Okay, so the term shared, I was thinking they're going to share in the wealth or share in something. That's wrong. I'm not understanding.
We simply get, again, all consulting contracts come out of that same account number.
So
if we had other consultants, if we needed to hire building inspectors or other staff members, they would come out of that account.
So it's just the account is shared?
Yes.
It's an accounting thing?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. I misunderstood with shared of who's getting, and then all the monies that we spend there, if we spend $60,000 for the plan checker or for whatever, that's recouped from the applicants?
That's correct.
So it's basically a wash?
Exactly a
Okay.
wash.
Thank you. Appreciate, misunderstood the grammar. Thank you.
Very good. So we've had a motion for approval of items 6A, B, D, and E. And have we had a second? Tom
Yes.
gave a second.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Okay, on item 6C, I first have a question for the attorney. Is it possible to approve all the warrants and hold out an item for further clarification?
I don't see why not. I
You don't see why not?
You know, you could do that, or you could simply take care of that one item and then approve the rest of the warrants. Either way you want to do it.
What was it?
Just have a quick question. Isn't it true that the warrants actually are already checks that have been issued, and that this is sort of being done more, the checks are out the door already, right, Mark?
I believe that's correct, yes.
So if there are questions related to a specific expenditure, I would imagine that this is really more of a formality of approving these warrants, and that questions should be directed to staff as to the background on that particular expenditure. So this isn't, we can't say, don't send out this check. These checks are already gone. These expenses have already been paid.
That is correct, and actually, just for your information, Council, some of our neighboring agencies, such as Belmont, no longer have this item on the agenda for that very reason.
This probably gets back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about the financial reports and so forth that can become that can come to us from the new software program. But the item I wanted to ask about or have questions about is on page 1 of the warrants, and the payment of check number 8152. And I'm just looking at the totals there, and it relates somewhat to going back to the Harvey Rose report, where we have contracts and contractors, and we pay retainers, but we don't know how many hours we're paying for because we don't require any hours to be reported. And when I look at the amounts here, I can see that based on some of them and by the hourly rates, that some are for instance, a senior engineer, but even when I take those out and subtract both the hours and the dollar amounts that go with it, the number of hours I'm left with and the dollar amount I'm left with comes out, when I divide those out, to a pretty high hourly rate. And so the question I have when I look at this is, who's doing the work, how many hours at what rate, and what are the projects? And it's something I alluded to earlier when we're talking about this reporting system that'll come out to us in the future, is it's really difficult to look at these numbers and say, okay, this is the project, I know what's being worked on, or I don't know what's being worked on, because it's the way it's listed. It would take some research to figure this out.
Matt, I have a following question, actually. From a standpoint of a council, I mean, I would assume that these approval of all of the invoices that are actually on the warrants list are actually things that would fall under the purview of our city manager in terms of his role of managing the day-to-day operations of the city. Isn't that the case? And I would ask my fellow council members as well, from the standpoint of what we are asked to do from a council's perspective is approve budgets, and those budgets stipulate pretty much buckets of money for individual projects and things like that that would fall outside of those. Staff does come to this council and asks for our approval and the approval of the expenditure of those funds. So, Matt, what it sounds like you're trying to do is to get detail into day-to-day expenditures and specifically related to invoices. Is that true?
I'm trying to figure out, based on a contract that we approved, how payments are made relative to that contract. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Through the chair, every time we've had warrants, this is the third time, I've had questions on every one of them. And I've gone to staff, and they've answered every one of them. So, again, I didn't have any on this one, on this specific check. I did have other questions. The difficulty is there's nobody here to answer that question, unfortunately, or any question we would have tonight. So I would just recommend as possibly something for our council, if you have questions, to go to Rebecca or go to Richard before. And again, it's time. And again, I have it, perhaps, or if you want to call me, and I'll go and ask for you. It's not a problem. I have the time to do it, and I've done it each time for the last 3 warrants. And because if we get into this detail, we're going to be here for a couple of hours just looking at numbers. And I appreciate your question, Matt. I'm not trying to denigrate it in any way. But I think if we have questions on specific warrants, we can get them answered. And it doesn't mean we can't report them out just like as a report when tonight. You could say, I had a question on Mokhtari or on Jim Smith or on Frank Jones, and here's the answer to it. So you could, actually report it out. But I don't think there's anybody here that can answer this. If you have a question specifically on it, I don't know. They can later, but I'm just, like I said, that's how I operate. I'm not saying that's the way we all should, but I'd be happy to carry the ball if anybody had any questions and be the representative to go do it, because I've done it on every single one. There are some I do not understand what we're doing here, because I am brand new. And the staff has been extremely cooperative to explain all the things that we are doing. I hope I haven't muddied the waters. I'm
Yeah, no,
trying to do that.
same. When I first got on council, I did the same thing, which was I had questions related to cell phone bills or something like that, and I just went to staff independently. I didn't bring it in front of the entire council. Matt, what it sounds like is that you'd like to have a more frequent accounting related to, specifically to the payments to Mokhtari Engineering. Because I noticed that, I mean, there's other payments on here to other contractors, so it's not necessarily a contracting reconciliation type of issue that you're looking at. It seems to me that it's more specifically related to Mokhtari Engineering and the contract with Mokhtari. And for that, I would, I would recommend that maybe we, at some future council meeting, decide at what level of detail we want to get reports on overall reporting for all of our subcontractors here within the city. I mean, let's not focus out. I don't want
Thank
this
you very
to seem
much, Inga,
like a witch
because
hunt.
I have been saying that for quite some time, and I would like to have that discussion, and I was trying to bring up that point a little bit when we were dealing with the software program. Correct. We approve contracts, we approve budgets, we approve funding in certain areas, and we need to get information that shows us where we are on those things. And if we need to have that discussion as a council, then let's do it. I would very much welcome that conversation. I've been after this for probably about 3 years, and I am not specifically picking on Mr. Mokhtari, as has been indicated, but it is a contract, and it is an example of how we get information through these warrants that pretty much seems, I'll agree with you, you've said before, we shouldn't even get the warrants. I'm not ready to go there yet because that puts us even more in the dark, considering the information we're not getting. However, yes, the warrants are a little more detailed oriented than they need to be. What we need is information, as I said earlier, that shows us where we are with the budgets on funds, projects, and departments, so that we can follow that. And you are correct, as you stated earlier. Sometimes you get a budget and you've spent 3/4 of your money and you're only 2 months into the year. Now, there might be...
Matt, that's the point. We can sit here and debate this point over and over again, but at the end of the day, it's, I think we need to have a discussion. And I don't think that I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you, so let's put it on the agenda.
To finish my point, that indeed, sometimes you can be 2 months through the year and you've spent 50% of your money. Now, when you're getting reports, you can see that, you can ask the questions, and usually, I've been on other boards where I get reports back, and I've asked those kind of questions in those roles. And typically there's a good answer for it, like we've got one-time upfront costs. This is why we spent 50% of our money, but we're only 2 months through. Fine. That gives us, as a board, an answer to that question, and we can move on. But we also should be able to know and be able to detect when we might be in trouble, headed for trouble on something, and when we're not. And so that we, as the decision makers on a budget, can make adjustments or give direction to staff. Look, we'd like some adjustments here or there. I don't see any problem with that. I don't see why I get such kickback on that kind of thing, quite frankly. So
why don't we schedule it for a future agenda, or perhaps our work program meeting, if that's an appropriate time for it.
Mr. City Manager, does that fit into our retreat? We've got a lot of things going on with that retreat.
It can. I mean, through the chair, a couple of things here. Number one, with respect to the warrant list, as Mr. Grisilli indicated, staff is more than willing to sit down with any council member at any time and walk through the specifics of this list so that we can identify what the expenses have been incurred for, how they've been authorized, and how they fit into the contract. More than happy to do that. We've been doing that on an individual basis as requested. Secondarily, as we talked about earlier this evening, staff is implementing new software and fully intend to provide more exhaustive reports in the future as that software is implemented. And we've given you a schedule this evening to try and accomplish that. Thirdly, with respect to the contracts, we've committed to bring back the contracts that were analyzed by Harvey Rose, with the idea that we would bring back the contracts themselves for you to review, and to make recommendations to you with respect to moving forward, either with those contracts or with employees, or with contracts that are modified. I mean, I think that even the staff would like to see greater consistency within the contracts that we have. We can talk generically about the Muctari contract this evening if you'd like. I mean, it is a retainer-based contract. There are some additional funds within that contract for other services, including construction management. It's all outlined within the contract. And, beyond that, I wasn't prepared this evening specific to this list. We haven't talked about it. I didn't bring the specific invoices in to talk about that this evening. But we have the documentation in the office, and would be more than happy to sit down with any individual council member and go over that documentation with you.
Brad?
Thank you. As far as, I just want to say, clarification of expenditures. I know I've asked several questions about it on the warrant list over time, and I think staff's been great about answering all those questions. It's really valuable for me at this point, coming into this new, as you know, Bob and I both have, to be able to look at all the expenditures and know where the money's going, right? So I hope the warrant list sticks around for a little while, even though tonight's discussion may not encourage staff to want that so much. But no, it's great, because you can see where all the money's going. We can ask questions. So that's been great for me. The biggest question is, and I think when we were hearing about the software earlier tonight, is, boy, you know, the most important thing is to pick what is it we want to track, and I think, I think you're right, Matt. I think that, and I think everybody agrees that we're not where we need to be, whether it's for council or for staff, necessarily to track expenses the way we should and could and want to. We should be able to pick up weekly reports, pick what we want to track, and get information. So I hear us working toward that, and I think everybody's excited about working toward that. I think on the retreat day, an item could be, what is it that we want to track? And then make those part of those a priority in some of these things.
I'm afraid that we'd get lost too much in the detail, because I think, each one of us has a different idea about what the role of this council is. I think that we bring to this council, and from the standpoint of a policy-setting board, which is indeed what this council should be, we've empowered our city manager to handle the day-to-day operations. We should be acting as a board of directors and allowing our city manager to really act as the CEO. I can't imagine any board of directors coming into the company where I work and saying, I want to see every single invoice that Inga Teagle Doherty has submitted for payment as a subcontractor on this particular project. To me, that's sending a message that we don't have faith or trust within our city manager. Now, from the standpoint of reconciliation and how we're doing against budget, I absolutely agree with that, and that's why I think, the quarterly budget reports that Richard and staff give to us are actually nice checkpoints. There isn't anything that I would want to be doing as a council that would be sort of like a knee-jerk reaction that says, Richard has proven to me, for time and time again historically, that he's pretty conservative. He will come in with revenue numbers that are lower estimates than actuals. And he will, the city has stayed in as good a financial position as it has because of the talent that we've had within our city staff. Now, that's not to say that there haven't been some questions that have been brought up, specifically related to individual contracts and the value and the benefit of those contracts. We can have a philosophical discussion about whether or not the city should continue to contract out certain key departments within the city. But for one, I do not see the value in going through line item by line item on a frequent basis, much more than sort of we set the budget in sort of the first part of the year, and we have our mid-year budget review where we do some modifications. Because any more detail than that, and I think we lose the forest for the trees. We get caught up in line items. In fact, I remember a budget discussion where it looked like our city manager's department was way over budget. And there were questions about that, but there were other departments that were way under budget. And it just has to do with when it comes to accounting, where they're actually slotting the expenditures and where they're slotting the revenues. And again, because of the unique nature of city revenues and city expenditures and the funds, my recommendation to my new council members, this isn't like a business where you can say, there's predictable expenditures, and you know what, you track them, and you're absolutely right. At the end of the year, you know where you're going to be. With sales tax dollars coming in, I don't know when they come in, quarterly, something like that. Property tax dollars coming in twice a year. It's really tough to start to say we can look at this exactly the same way as we can a budget like, you, Brad, you and I look at when we determine how well our department's doing against budget in terms of meeting the corporate goals. So with that, I would suggest that, if there's more information that you need, that each one of us individually sort of talk to the finance staff in terms of what level of detail we'd like, and not necessarily sort of bring it up or drill down through all of these levels of detail, especially as it relates to the day-to-day management.
Okay, we're going to stop the discussion right there. Inga just gave what would be her opinion if we were to actually have this on the agenda for a discussion. I think I heard from Brad, he would like to have it on the agenda. I certainly would. I know Tom said yes, and so I think Bob also. So staff, if we could agendize this for a future meeting and not have it at the council retreat, I think council would appreciate that, to have a discussion about the kind of information that we're looking for when we're following the budget and monitoring the budget. So
level of detail and frequency of reports against budget, expenditures against budget. Is that what I'm hearing?
good summary, yes. I have a speaker slip. Do you want to speak on the item that I pulled and not all the discussion that we just had? Because the discussion we just had is really not on the agenda.
You need to come up to
until
the
public comment? You should speak now. Okay.
Clint Miller, San Carlos. I think what this is about transparency. And in the past, we have had a problem with transparency. We had to hire Harvey Rose to sort this thing out. Now, I'd like to point out that individual warrants have been pulled previously, and there has been no great discussion of this. The treasurer is sitting right back here. He pulled two individual warrants. And there was nothing, we didn't go through 15 minutes of verbiage here. I would suggest that just answering the question would just make it a lot easier.
Thank you. Okay, on this item, what I'm going to do is go ahead and move approval of the warrants. And I will have the questions I have on the detail cleared up with the city manager individually. So, I've moved approval of item 6.
Second.
C. And
Second.
Tom gave a second. Roll call.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Okay, item 6F. I had pulled that for a couple of reasons. One, Inga had pointed out some spelling things, but I also wanted to point out on both the resolution for the City Council and the duplicate, which is for the RDA, it has listed the Foster City Chamber of Commerce. We probably just want to change that to either San Carlos or just Chamber of Commerce, I suppose. But the question I had specifically about the policy itself has to do with the frequency of submitting expense reports. And it on page, well, sorry, Council, the pages are not numbered. But if you find your yellow sheet that has the resolution itself, and then you look at Exhibit A, and you turn your page once.
The last page of attachment
and
1.
twice, and it's before attachment 2.
Right.
Right. Thank you, Bob. Under expense report content and submission deadline, it says officials must submit their expense reports within 30 days of an expense being incurred, accompanied by receipts documenting each expense. And the question I have about that, it does say under the law that if you turn to page, let me find this. You find your 2005 California Statutes, Chapter 700. This is Attachment 3. And on page 3 of that, it says, members of a legislative body shall submit expense reports within a reasonable time as determined by the legislative body. So that is something that we can determine, correct?
You can. The 30 days was recommended by the League of Cities. So we have included that in the policy for
Okay.
the city.
Well, here's my question and something for consideration by the rest of my council members. I'm really bad at submitting my expense reports. I will admit to that. Sometimes I don't do so for 9 months. But one
You
of the...
don't have to admit to that.
Yeah, I know, but I do. But the thing is, sometimes I keep track of, mileage to, like when I go to Roundtable and some of these meetings, and if I were to do this every month, not only is that a bit cumbersome, but also sometimes, unless you go to a league event or something that's a bigger expense, all you're really doing is tracking mileage. You could end up turning in an expense report for, $2.22. But if it's saved up for at least a quarter, at least it has some, it's something that's substantial and is worth writing, the check is worth the paper it's written on, sort of thing.
Well, as you know from reading the report, this has just gone into effect January 1st for applicable to all cities, special districts. Some of it's going to have to be ironed out. One of the complaints that led to this legislation was the fact that some reimbursements were submitted, a year after it occurred, and they wanted to keep them timely, keep them within a budget year. You're also going to have to submit reports to the council for every meeting you go to that you make a reimbursement request. So there are a lot of things we're going to have to toe the line on, and hopefully, as these things get ironed out over this year and next year, some of them may be less intensive. It's a good example, just getting a mileage reimbursement for $3. You might want to put several of those together and put them in quarterly. But I recommend that for now we stick to what the league has recommended as to putting in these reimbursement requests.
Well, let me ask you this, Bob. It also reads as though it's kind of up to staff or whoever reviews right now we turn in our reports and they get reviewed, I suppose, by somebody in finance, and then they make a determination on whether to pay it or not, I suppose. I've never had any, well, actually one time I've had a question about something that I submitted. I didn't do anything wrong, but it's just a question that somebody had. So I suppose even if I turned it in quarterly, or any of us turned something in quarterly, the staff person in finance could make that determination that, yeah, it's quarterly, but, I see what the guy's doing here, and these are the meetings that have gone to. They would be authorized still to make that payment. Is that correct?
They will be, and we're going to have to determine, with the help of the treasurer and finance, I suppose, who within staff is going to audit, because one of the policies is that these expense reports will be audited. Law requires that they be audited. So we're going to have to do that and verify that the expenses are within the policy that we've set.
Can we change the policy so that we only can submit for reimbursements for over, say, 10 miles or something like that? And then that way we don't have the $2 check? I mean, I haven't, the only time I send in a expense report is if I go down to Progress Seminar or go to Sacramento, in which case it's worth the time to actually put the check or put the expense report together. So
You'll note that the reimbursements are discretionary to the council. You don't have to submit a reimbursement request. It's up to you. So if
we don't submit,
too
we
minor,
don't have to report.
That's right.
yeah, exactly.
That might
And it
be-
doesn't have to be audited either.
With the new software, we should be able to track when people submit them and how often, and this is going to be fantastic.
That's going to blow the cork.
We got
off.
a GPS
Units will
on you
never
as
be able to
well.
handle that.
Yeah. Oh, Lordy.
Any other questions?
So we still could, again, the recommendation of 30 days was the league recommendation. I
Yes.
suppose as a council, if we wanted to do something, do it quarterly or something like that, we could have that decision. or that
30
discussion.
days is a well-ordered term.
Yeah, agreed.
I think you ought to kick it in on time.
Okay.
Or lose it.
If it's worthwhile
All right.
getting it done, you should be done in a timely manner, especially as it relates to the timeliness of the reporting.
Okay, well, I had my questions answered, and I think heard from other council members.
Can I make a motion on this, Mr. Mayor?
Certainly can.
Can I make a motion to approve consent item 6F, please?
Second.
And for the record, could it indicate that's a recommendation for both resolutions? There are two resolutions, one
Yes,
for the
there's
city
one for
council,
city
one for
council,
RDA.
one for RDA.
And-
For both ones, yes.
Bob, will your resolution, or your motion include the?
Correct, Foster City, yes.
Correct, well, not just Foster City, but there are other duplicates as well in here, so,
Whatever duplicates need to be corrected.
okay, perfect.
Have staff do that.
Beautiful.
Okay. Roll call.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. I have to be more timely now. Forced.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll hire you.
For a small fee. Bob will please prepare your expense reports.
Okay, moving on. Now we're jumping back to 7B, and we'll be back in order from here on out. So item 7B is an ordinance modifying the number of members on the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Do we have someone to report?
Mr. Mayor, what's submitted on the staff report, it's self-explanatory, changing the number of members on the commission or committee to make it easier for them to achieve a quorum. They actually have concurred and made this request. So.
Very good.
So, Bob, the one change we make is the at-large bike riders from 4 to 3. Is that what changed?
That's correct, and we've taken out language that was in the original ordinance regarding staggering initial terms because they've already had their initial terms.
Right,
So we've
okay.
taken that out.
Any other questions?
I would move introduction of ordinance number 1367, an ordinance of the City of San Carlos amending section 2.24.250 of this municipal code modifying the number of members of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Second.
A motion by Inga Teagle Doherty and a second by Brad Lewis. Roll call.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item 7C is a recommendation to adopt a resolution amending the management group salary and benefit schedule by creating and funding an administrative services director classification at a top step of $12,019.56 per month.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, this is a proposed creation of a classification for Administrative Services Director. As you all know, the Finance Director has indicated that he will be spending his time with RGS, LGS full-time, starting the first of the next fiscal year. We've reduced his time to approximately 50% for the remainder of this fiscal year. And while on the one hand, this is creating, some challenges for us with respect to providing for the duties of the Finance Director Services, on the other hand, it also presents an opportunity for us to take a look at the organization and consider a reorganizational structure to streamline and bring some of the administrative functions together under one house. With that, we are proposing that we create an administrative services department that would include the functions of risk management, information technology, finance, human resources, and the receptionist duties. The idea here would be that we would create this position, which is, as it's structured, is being proposed at a level slightly below the Assistant City Manager, slightly above the Human Resources Director and Finance Director, to supervise those respective positions, to do an internal recruitment, because we believe that we have the talent on staff to actually rise to this particular position. We then will come back to you once that has occurred with additional organizational modifications, potentially dependent upon who is selected to fill this position. So on the one hand, we wanted to create the proper level of a position to provide the supervisory duties and responsibilities for consolidating those functions. On the other hand, we wanted to create a competitive thing within the city organizational structure, let people make application for that position, select from the internal candidates, and then come back and consider some additional reorganizational ideas once it's determined who is selected for this particular position. Mr. Mayor?
Thank Thank you.
I had a
Questions
quick-
from
yeah,
council?
I had a quick question. You mentioned that you're going to be selecting from internal candidates. Is there a reason why you would not open it up to external candidates as well?
It's twofold. One is that we do believe that we have the talent on staff to serve in this capacity.
I do too. I mean, I didn't mean that to disparage staff at all.
And Frank, I mean, I'll just be perfectly blunt. I mean, I think there are advantages too to doing an external recruitment and hiring the best and the brightest. On the other hand, with our restricted revenue situation, I believe that there's an opportunity here for some additional consolidation and merging of functions once this person is selected internally. And we may be able to eliminate a position, we may be able to downgrade a position. I can't tell you that yet until I know which position we're talking about, but I think that there are some other savings that we'll be able to realize. If we did an external recruitment and brought somebody in from the outside, that would be a new expense, an additional expense, and wouldn't provide us the opportunity that some attrition might otherwise provide us.
Good question. So, Mark, you really don't know whether you're going to eliminate a position or downgrade a position at this point. You're just you're not sure yet how that's going to work.
That's correct, because I don't know which position will have the person in it that will achieve the new position. For example, I mean, it might be possible just to take the duties of the position that is vacated and merge it into the new classification, depending upon whether or not the person in that position has duties that are consistent with the duties within this job that we're creating. On the other hand, if somebody that is providing another function that's essential, say the fire marshal applies, and gosh, we think he's the best person for the job, we still need a fire marshal at the end of the day. And so I'll have to reconsider how exactly we would, make adjustments within the organization under that eventuality.
So, in effect, you're just looking for the approval to try to work with this, and we don't know whether we're going to add or subtract or downgrade or do. We just don't. We're not sure, but this is gives us options.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, in a perfect world, I think that there are some opportunities here by putting all of these functions together that we'll be able to do some merging and some consolidation. I believe that that will be the outcome, but I can't tell you specifically what those would be at this time. At worst case scenarios, we're taking the funding for the finance director and applying that towards an administrative services director that is marginally higher.
And just as a little bit of background as well, to my two new council members, actually, Mike Garvey, before he left, had actually talked about doing some reorganizations, but out of deference to a new city manager coming in, he didn't actually bring those before council, thinking that Mark might, and obviously has, wanted to sort of look at his own organizational structure and come back and make recommendations to council. So this has been actually going on for some time. It's not kind of out of the blue here.
I guess what I want to say, this is exactly the kind of thinking that I think we need to start doing. So thanks for doing it, and we absolutely need to sort of see where we can consolidate to make this budget thing work. So I'm glad you're thinking in this way to get creative about how we can make this thing work and make it work for less money. So thanks. I appreciate it. No questions?
Okay. Tom?
Just a couple of questions, Mark. The ultimate intent is to achieve good performance at a lower cost if we look far enough downstream. Is that fair, or are we simply adding another mid-management position and looking at basically an increase in cost rather than something neutral or down?
That's the former, not the latter. I would say that the emphasis, though, I think, is on the quality of the service. I can't tell you at this point that there will be dramatic cost savings until I know exactly what position we're talking about that the new person comes from and whether or not there is a chance to consolidate that position into this position. But I do believe that irrespective of that there are efficiencies that can be realized by a shorter span of control, a reduced number of people reporting directly to the manager than what this organization currently has. And I believe that there are some efficiencies that can be realized by having one person who is responsible for all of the administrative functions or many of the administrative functions that are contained within this particular job description. And I think one example of that is the ERP or the Munis system. That is a system that is currently housed within the finance department, but it affects other areas, including information technology and including human resources. And when we sit down and talk about how that system is being implemented, there are those three departments, literally, that are in those discussions with different ideas, and they all of the department heads have equal stature, if you will, within the organization, albeit the responsibility is ultimately assigned to the finance department director. I believe under this kind of a scenario, you would have an administrative services director that would be responsible for implementation of that program. For me, the buck would stop with that one person. And that person would be able to coordinate HR, IT, and finance and make sure that the proper skills that the organization has are being applied to the implementation of that program.
Okay, I like the model. I think it really is something I'm used to in my prior life, and I think it will work here. If we approve the resolution, does that allow you to go ahead and hire the person?
Yes.
So that would be done, and we would watch for results.
Yes, I would report to you. We would do the internal recruitment. We would do interviews. Hopefully, we would find somebody on staff that wants the job, that we feel comfortable with promoting into that position. I would report that back to you and then deal with the newly created vacancy that the organization would have. Not knowing what that position is, we will look at the organization at that point and determine which might be the best direction to move. That may require that we come back to you for another reorganizational shift. It may not. It may just be a position that we might be able to offer up during the upcoming budget cycle for possible reduction and future savings moving into next fiscal year.
Okay, I'm with it.
Yeah, through the chair, I just want to make sure, I mean, when Bob asked the question about just because we're adding another position, you're still bound by the overall budget. So this position, if you were to hire someone into this position, you would have to eliminate and free up those budgetary dollars elsewhere, probably through one of the other positions that you talked about, either downgrading or hopefully shifting one person into an area where you're actually allowing them some more responsibility and you're compensating them fairly for that additional responsibility. Is that correct?
This particular resolution does create the funding, though, for this position at this level. Now, in practice, it will take a month or two to fill the position. We will advertise, we will recruit, we will interview. I would like to have somebody on board that would be able to work with the finance director while he is still here so that there is some cross-training as we move forward into the next fiscal year. And so there will be some duplication because we won't have monies from the finance director position because that money is being spent on the contract. However, a position is being vacated. It will be at a lower level, I suspect. It's possible that it won't be, but I suspect it'll be a lower level position that will be eliminated. And the person that moves into this position then will be entitled to a small increase. We are still living within the confines of our budget. We are asking for funding, though, for that marginal increase to fund this particular position and to grant whichever employee is granted this position that small salary increase.
Okay.
I have a question that segues that pretty well because of the budget. We've received, we have our 2004-2006 proposed budget that we saw, and then we received the 2004-2006 budget, and I compared the two. I went to the personnel summary from those budgets, and I looked at what was in there, and I compared it to this item here, which is Appendix A, right here, and I have keyed that out and taken a look at what was in the 2004-2006 proposed budget. Of course, there was no administrative services director, but also in this proposed budget, there's no deputy city manager. There was no economic development housing director, no finance officer, no parks superintendent, and no public works superintendent, and no senior management analyst, all of which are on this list. And then when I looked at the 2004-2006 budget as dated 11/10/2005, I see these new positions: deputy city manager, a finance officer, a parks superintendent, and a public works superintendent. And so I'm having trouble with this whole reorganization thing when we've got all these new positions in this new budget. And this, I don't think this has even been adopted. This is just was presented to us, I suppose, for the future. I don't know. You're looking a little bit quizzical, and I was a little bit quizzical
Through the chair,
myself.
can I ask a question? Can I ask a question? As I understood, and maybe I'm newbie, this Appendix A is just, it just shows possible
Yeah, they're just possible positions.
situations. It's not who we have, it's who we could have. As I understand government, and I'm not that good at government has thousands of classifications. So
Right.
I don't mean, I don't know.
That's why
Mark,
I'm asking the question,
I
Bob.
guess
How am I
through-
supposed to resolve all this?
Well, through the chair, let me see if I
Looking
can
at the budget,
resolve
and we've
some
got
of
all
the-
these positions.
But they're not positions, they're just defined roles,
Yeah, let me
not
see if I
necessarily
can.
bodies.
Well, hold on here,
Okay.
because I do have this document. This is, again, the 11/10/2000. It's dated 11/10/2005. Okay, it's a personnel summary. It was in our budget, and for adopted budget 2005, 2006. No, amending. This is the last column. Amending staffing total. Like I said, all those positions that I named are new.
Through the chair.
And one of the questions that I would really key on, Mark, is this position of finance officer, because it says in the staff report one of the ways we'd be paying for this change partially is through the finance director, which will change in our new budget year, new fiscal year.
My understanding is that you did have a 2004-2006 budget. It was a two-year budget. Subsequent to that, there have been mid-year budget adjustments, both the prior year and this year. During that time, there have been other positions that have been created. There have been other organizational maneuverings, such as what is being proposed tonight, that have created the positions that you've just itemized. In some cases, they were reclassifications. In some cases, they may have been new positions. But in each and every case, they were newly created positions by this city council. And it happened before I arrived on the scene. And I would defer to Brian if I'm misstating any of this.
That's correct.
So when did we, I'm not getting this, when did we create the position of finance officer?
The finance officer position was created by the council at one of your actions, and basically it was recruited at the same time, as I recall, as the recreation supervisor in the senior center. And so it was established by the council, and then the HR director recruited it, and there was a competitive process. It was open to public. An outside candidate was hired. And as for the other question regarding the park superintendent and the public works superintendent, those two positions were formerly assistant superintendents, and the council will probably recall that when John Barker, who used to be the general services superintendent, retired, that the former city manager, Mr. Garvey, came to you and said that he would like to retain the general services superintendent position at the recommendation of Mr. Weiss and Mr. Mukhtari, on the theory that just in case the two assistants didn't work out when they moved up to the superintendent level, it would be there as a reserve. You probably will recall that there was some discussion by some of the members of the former council about eliminating that position straight out, and that in fact at your council meeting earlier this year, you did finally eliminate that position. And to Mr. Griselli's question, Councilmember Griselli, you are correct that in some instances we do keep the classifications, whether it's a management unit or in management or whatever, on the books, even if the position is not funded. So that you are correct.
So which of these, now that actually is marked that way on the bottom of this yellow sheet, Appendix A, with a star. City manager requested these classifications be kept active, but there is no position allocated to the title. And again, when I looked through the budget, for instance, senior management analyst, I see it listed here. I scoured through all the organizational charts, didn't find it anywhere.
Yeah, the
But
senior
it's listed here.
Well, the senior management analyst existed until Mr. Garvey came to you with a reorganization where he created the positions of deputy city manager and economic development and housing director. And at that time, he recommended keeping senior management analyst on the books, but upgrading that position to deputy city manager, which is Mr. Maltby's position.
Matt, I think where you're getting confused is that this list here that's in our staff report are essentially just stating that these classifications, this job title of accountant two, for example, has been approved by the city council, maybe not for a full-time head count within our current budget, but that we have done a benchmarking as compensation is set amongst cities and local jurisdictions. They do benchmarking, and they benchmark other local agencies of similar size, and they say, for this particular job, which we call accountant two, how, and given these responsibilities, what is the min-max salary range for this particular job? And so what you're seeing in front of you here is that we, as a city council, have said at some point we may or may not have a economic development housing director, but if we do have a person in that role, that person will be paid not more than, and it's on this list, $9,297.05 per month. And so that's all this is. This just simply states that there are classifications within the management unit, which is a bargaining unit through the unions, and these are the maximum salaries that should Mark want to hire someone into that position, that he can come and he can pay them. That's not saying that there is a full-time employee in any of these positions, and in fact, quite frankly, I think that the footnote at the bottom about keeping these classifications active, I think you should probably remove that, actually, because it doesn't, I mean, I think you put it in there just for clarification, but that may change tomorrow, and in which case, I don't understand why it would be part of the resolution, that footnote, because it may be that tomorrow you come to us, or next week, or next month, and you say, you know what, as a matter of fact, I think I'd like to take this general services superintendent and move the public works superintendent into that role because I'm giving them more responsibility. And that would be allowed because it would already be predefined rather than having to create another new classification, as we're being asked to do in tonight's agenda item, which is the general administrative services classification role.
We could certainly do that. I mean, we brought this forward as it was previously submitted to the city council with the change of administrative services director. And
yeah, I would remove it just because I think that it somehow implies that this is somehow tied to some budget, when indeed it's not. This is just simply a listing of the classifications that we have within our management unit within the city of San Carlos.
That's correct.
Okay, I have a question then. When did we adopt the 2004-2006 budget? I mean, I've got a document here that's dated 11/10/2005. City clerks just told me that it was on May 9th, 2005, that the rest of the council voted to create the finance officer position to upgrade to the deputy city manager. And what was the other one, Christine? Economic Development Housing Director.
Correct.
To create those positions. Okay, so I'm looking at a document here that's dated after that action, again, that took place on 5/9/05. Here's something that's dated 11/10/2005, and for the adopted budget 2005-2006, for that column, those positions are still empty, blank. I mean, it doesn't even give an accounting for it. It doesn't have it at all. So that's why it's a little confusing. You look through this, things aren't meshing. They're not coordinated. They're not together. So with all due respect to Inga's explanation for what this is, that's all well and good, but when this doesn't align, it's rather confusing. It's confusing because it says, what did we approve, what haven't we approved, what do we have money for, what don't we have money for, and especially in light of potentially creating a new position that's going to show up on a list now and cost us potentially more money or maybe less. It's a little disconcerting.
One of the things that I will be proposing is a one-year budget cycle. We have adopted a 2-year budget cycle in the past. There are advantages to that system. There are disadvantages to that system. With the 2-year budget that we've adopted historically here, at least with this last cycle, there were significant uses of reserves to balance the budget. Every year during that 2-year cycle, I mean both years during that 2-year cycle, and then during the end of the fiscal year, the city council took a look at means by which they could do cost savings, and the city manager brought back other organizational shifts to the council for consideration. Every time the council acted upon those mid-year budget recommendations or reorganizations or reclassifications, it changed the document that was originally adopted back I imagine, in June of 2004.
But again, Mark, I guess what I'm saying is we took an action on May 9th, created 2 positions. Here's a budget document created 11/10/2005, and those positions still aren't showing up in the budget. So how do we know that we have the money to pay for those positions? If it's not in this document, then it means it's not in the budget.
Is that indeed,
am I being
is that
unclear
an appendix? I mean, is that just a summary that just did not get updated to reflect the current actual positions as they were filled? Well, the budget is...
Perhaps so. Question is why? I mean, if we've got, my God, Inga, we've got a deputy city manager, economic development housing director, park superintendent, and what's the other one? There's another one in here that we're all
I know we created those
amended
positions.
staffing totals. How are we paying for those? That's I just named off 4 positions that are worth about $10,000 per month apiece.
There were mid-year budget adjustments made. There was a resolution adopted that allocated additional monies and included a new number that was the bottom line budget value for this city this fiscal year. I can't tell whether or not the schedule you're looking at has been updated to reflect those changes that were made by the most recent resolution. Certainly there was a document back in 2004, as we explained earlier when we brought that forward. If you look at that document, it took the 2 funds that we used to balance our general fund down to virtually zero. We knew at mid-year that the situation wasn't that bad because the revenues exceeded our expectations and the expenditures were tapered back because of mid-year budget reductions. And so we made those adjustments mid-year the first year. I'm speculating that additional adjustments were made at the end of the fiscal year. I don't know.
That's correct.
And then we came back to you just a few weeks ago with some additional changes to reflect some cost reductions, some cuts that were being proposed by staff. At the same time, we came back to you for some expenditure enhancements to cover some other expenses that we knew that the city was going to incur. So those changes were made to the document that was originally adopted back in 2004. I don't even know, frankly, whether or not the finance department has incorporated all of those changes into a new schedule. They certainly have the new number. We have it by specific budget reduction that this city council adopted at the very last meeting.
So, Mark, would it be safe to summarize to say that from a dollars perspective, the budget is accurate, however, from an attachment perspective, there is room for some improvement and cleanup to make sure that it reflects current personnel within the city?
Well, let me make a clarification here. The normal practice that we have followed in this finance department is that in the summer you get a proposed budget, and once the council approves it and once the auditor has done their final numbers, you get an adopted budget, and I presume that that's the schedule that the mayor is referring to. But it has also been the case in the last year, as the city manager has mentioned and also some of the council members have mentioned, that we have done mid-year adjustments and we've also done some reorganizations. And we don't routinely reissue the budget document every time you go through one of those, or we'd have several budget documents during the year. So that's, I think, where we're seeing the difference.
And I think, just to tag on to that, I mean, I think that when you have a 2-year budget, it lends itself to that kind of issue. The 1-year document, you might still very well want to consider that mid-year. I suspect that you will. But because it is simply a one-year period, you don't have that opportunity for it to run on, such as what a 2-year document will. You lose some flexibility with having a one-year document. There are some advantages to being able to, from a management standpoint, if you have a department budget that you know your monies are going to carry over from the first year to the second year, it gives you some additional flexibility. The 1 year is a bit tighter from a management control perspective. That's what I will recommend to you because of our budget situation for this upcoming fiscal year.
Okay. Well, I'd like
certainly-
to move that we approve resolution number, next in line, 2006-8, amending the management group salary and benefit schedule.
For discussion, I'll second that motion.
It's been moved, it's been seconded, it's open for discussion.
Well, as I stated earlier, I believe this is a good move organizationally. I can't speak to the differences in what schedules tell us in terms of personnel. However, I do believe that from a monetary budgetary standpoint, we've got things covered. Perhaps from a listing standpoint, we're out of sync. But despite that, I think that Mark's plan to group these functions under a single administrative management position is right on. I think that someone tight with these functions can do a lot to economize. I would trust that when at the end of the day we'll be saving money. It may take a bit to work it through, but I think we're going in the right direction, and I think this speaks well to the administrative moves forward.
My only comment is that I think it's important to enable staff to make headway toward consolidation so that we can ultimately save money in the budget. And in my discussions with the city manager, that's the intent here. I wish it could all happen at the same time, frankly, that we could sort of say, here's the position, here's the org chart, here's how it changes, here's what we're saving. But it sounds like we need to sort of step into that process. So at any rate, it's my feeling after reading this and talking with the city manager that this is a path to us consolidating, having a more efficient government. So I think it's a good thing. And just for me, but by the way, the appendix to me was there's sort of a lesson in abstraction here, which is approve potential positions, not removing the obligation to work to budget by any particular manager, so that there's a certain amount of makeup of departments and so forth that can be done within it. But anyway, that's just a comment.
I don't have any further comments. I mean, I think it's great. I thought it was a good idea back when, about 6-9 months ago, just in terms of looking at ways to streamline the organization and to get more efficiencies and give more responsibilities to our current staff that I think are capable and willing to take on additional responsibilities. So it's a good move.
I'm going to go along with it, but I feel like you're asking council to really trust big time on this. I see what you're doing, and you're trying to consolidate. And I will speak frankly to you. You spoke frankly to us. I will speak frankly to you. The problem I have with this is I think we're top-heavy, and this does nothing. When I look at the boxes, the organizational chart, I don't see any boxes going away. And that's, quite frankly, why I was looking at this personnel summary from the budget. And I don't like it when I get information that doesn't seem to be complete or isn't correct. And even if it's just a personnel summary, I think what you're telling me is that the numbers are fine in terms of dollars and cents, but what isn't fine is this report on the personnel summary and who we have working for us and who we don't, what positions we're filling, what positions we're budgeting for and paying for, and which ones we aren't. And I am deeply concerned about that. But I will go along with this, with your plan here. So we need a motion, or we've had a motion, we've had a second, we've had discussion, excuse me. Roll call.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is...
Through the chair,
item-
excuse me. Matt, I apologize. We are going to, if we take the next agenda, apparently there is a rule that we can't go past 10:30. So someone
Right,
will have
we
to
need a
make,
vote, yeah.
someone will have to make a motion.
You could do that.
I'm planning to vote against it personally.
Yeah, I am too.
Well, we could always continue this item, I suppose.
I'm sorry?
We could always continue this item to another council meeting if you, if
Yeah,
that's
I
the
would
option.
recommend that we, or actually move that we continue this item to
I will
the next
advise you
agenda.
that unfortunately, we have a pretty, Mark and I are working diligently to get items on our agenda and meet them out appropriately. And, you know, because of things not in our control, we have a lot of business to take care of between now and March. And I can tell you that with the 13th being kicked out, we won't have that as a council meeting, except I think for some items. But we're having difficulty getting all this stuff taken care of. So if I'm just telling you that if we push this out to another council meeting, it's it's just going to be domino effect down the line. What's the pleasure of the council on this
Well,
item?
actually, maybe I can take a straw vote. I mean, do my fellow council members actually think that this has potential for live discussion? Or is it
To the
a
chair,
slam
I think we could also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we can also agree to talk about this for 10 minutes and then
Right, we
make a
could.
decision to continue if we don't, or some time limit. I'm just saying that could exceed 10:30, but not give it an endless.
Personally, I can go to 11 o'clock. But I think what we need to do, and Matt, believe me, I don't want your job, because I don't know how we're going to get through all these things. And Mark, I don't want your job to try to figure out how to schedule. Seriously, I'm very serious here. How to schedule all these things, and I'm not trying to make a grandstand play, but I think we have to be extremely efficient in our agendas. And I think when we limit sometimes the folks out here to 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And believe me, I'm not one to say that I'm not talking more than I should, probably because I have tons of questions because I'm so darn brand new. But I think we have to be efficient up here too. And if we're not, if we realize we can't be as efficient as we think, we're just not going to be able to get to all these items. And it's just a fact of life. The first couple of meetings, we unfortunately, probably because some of us might have spoken longer, me included, than we should have, we weren't able to reach it. And I just wanted to make a point that I think we just need to be more efficient, especially up here. I would willing to go to 11 o'clock, Brad, on your thing, just to see if we can work through on this. I mean, I would be willing to do that. So,
This is, by the way, a return item that the previous council saw. It was sent back based on some recommendations primarily from Inga. So I'm not sure how much more deliberation we have on this, except we do have 2 new council members who've never seen this item before. But Inga suggested a straw vote. Let's go down the line.
as I said, I'll be happy to vote till 11 o'clock, but that's about where I'm going.
Well, no, I guess my question for my straw vote would be more, I mean, Bob, do you have significant questions about this, or do you feel pretty comfortable moving ahead with?
Well, especially after what Mayor Grocott said, that this is coming back. I only have a couple of questions, if any at all.
Okay.
Quite honestly. So I don't think I have a lot, but Brad may have some, and I'm not trying to
Well, no, I'm
tell
just
people
kind
not
of doing
to do
it like this type of thing. I'm not looking for, and I'm not trying to preclude. I hear what you're saying as well. I think we should be quite a bit more efficient up here. Tom?
I have one typo.
Okay. Brad?
I don't have a lot of.
Okay, then I'll move to extend the meeting past 10:30, not to
Second.
exceed 10:45. No.
No.
Not to exceed 11.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's move on. Liz Cullinan, do you have a staff report on this?
Brief
Keep
staff
it brief,
report?
Liz.
Well, I think that's your choice.
Thank
Would you like
you.
a brief? I'm happy to take questions that you have to the staff report, but otherwise it outlines the design guidelines that we presented to you. And as you've said, this is something that has been brought before the former council before, and we provided the minutes of the City Council Planning Commission for background for the new council members, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, I want to go first to the new council members because they haven't seen this before, give them the majority of the time. Brad.
I was actually, one thing I was curious about is, it says, changes relate to the densities to be considered in association with a comprehensive general plan update. So, and I've heard some discussion about that we will be visiting the general plan for an update in the near future. Is that right?
Yes.
So, part of...
Maybe ask Liz
Sorry,
that
Liz.
question.
That's something that you would be discussing perhaps during your retreat, and something that we'll be bringing forward to you in terms of a general plan impact fee for discussion. But it's not something that's been budgeted or approved. There is a future discussion of that in a work program for 0607, but it has not been authorized by the City Council.
And so will the multifamily projects be something that we can also open up and discuss at that point in time?
Yes, it's very appropriate to do that.
Okay.
Is that it? Thank you, Brad.
I was just a bit confused by the alternatives. Again, I guess I'm having a grammar problem tonight. We're going to be revisiting the general plan, you mentioned?
We are hoping that you do, yes. We're hoping that you authorize that.
Okay.
That is, excuse me, Bob, that is something, Liz is correct, that is something that we probably will discuss at the council retreat, is what we want to do with the general plan.
And that would impact how I probably take alternative 1 or alternative 2, how, depending on which one I would go for. So that's what I was just trying to understand. If other folks have some input to that, that would help me.
Tom?
Liz, regarding the options on the second page, there are 4 options. But there's really no conclusion. Are we basically saying that none of these options work?
By the options, we're saying that, with all due respect to the council, that imposing a minimum density could actually defeat the intent that you're looking for, which is to encourage multifamily development. And we are also saying that we do not, for example, tonight you could not adopt a change to the zoning ordinance, which would increase densities because we would need to do an environmental review, and we think that would be best done in association with some other general plan updates. It would be a more comprehensive approach and environmentally sound. So you really, the only thing that you could do this evening, in our professional opinion, would be to adopt the ordinance as proposed or with some minor changes, but not changes that would increase density or have other environmental impacts.
Right, okay. So you looked at these options and they basically don't work. You're going back to the statement in the ordinance, and that's the direction we move.
That's correct, with the primary change being the adoption of design guidelines.
Okay.
Liz, I think what I'm hearing from the questions, for instance, like with what Brad was asking about, tying this to the general plan, and Bob mentioned it as well, is I look at page 3 and I read item 4 under where it says refer consideration of relaxation of standards to next general plan update. And then it gives a paragraph and it talks about why that would be advisable to do that, primarily because, as you said, if we make any changes that require environmental impact reports, it gets expensive and, that sort of thing. So what I didn't get, though, is I saw that and I read 4 and I thought, that's exactly what I'm thinking. I want to go with 4. And then I look at the alternatives and I can't figure out which alternative fits with number 4. So could you help us out there?
Absolutely. Number 4 is basically deferring everything. So it's deferring consideration of the ordinance. It's deferring consideration of a general plan amendment. You would not act on an ordinance this evening under option number 4.
Oh, okay. I don't think that is exactly what I wanted to do.
Okay.
You had a comment?
That's correct.
Well, my only comment is partly glad that we would review the general plan, because then, for me, I can react to this more comprehensively than I can right now. So my first instinct was to refer it so I can get more up to speed on what all the issues are, so I know, what we're getting at here. So for my 2 cents, yeah, I'd prefer to refer it so we could look at the general plan together and make sure that we're making all those changes, and that helps us achieve our comprehensive goals.
And just to be clear on what the staff recommendation is, we are recommending alternative 1, which would be asking you to introduce the ordinance this evening, so you could have design guidelines at a minimum, and then talk about the densities during a general plan update.
So the ordinance, as you're delivering it to us, is basically a restatement of what we have, with taking out some material that doesn't apply,
That's correct.
consolidating, building the tables. We're not really introducing new elements
Other than the design guidelines,
other than that.
Precisely.
Yeah.
right, which I
And
think
you-
are
Brad,
consistent with.
You're on board with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to, actually, just to, I agree that there's a couple of typos in this ordinance, like on every single table. It looks like it's under building height in the second column, 30 feet 1 inch to 40 inches. Those should be changed from the inch designation to the foot designation.
Thank you.
35-inch buildings are tough
Yeah,
to go
yeah.
into.
No, well, 40-inch buildings, yeah, exactly. So that was the typo that was consistent, everyone. And the other question I had really relates to on page 9, item B. It's about midway through the page, under building materials and colors. I'm curious where this all colors shall be predominantly earth tones came from. And I would actually recommend we strike that, because I think earth tones can be a lot of things. And I go back to, Bob, you remember Charlie Getz on Planning Commission with us, with his whole, was it gentrification, or making everything look exactly the same up and down the peninsula. And I think once we start to say predominantly earth tones, we start to limit San Carlos's ability to be unique in that respect. And there are a lot of really nice buildings. I agree. I don't want it to look like the Painted Ladies up in San Francisco. However, I don't think that would be supported necessarily by architectural review anyway. So unless there's a staff huge proponent, or staff recommendation for why we should keep in there a restriction around colors, I would like to actually see that language stricken.
And just by way of background, it's incorporated into the city's design guidelines for the commercial areas, and there is also a reference in the general plan, but it is not mandatory. It's certainly a policy call on this particular ordinance.
Okay, a follow-up question, Liz. What is meant by earth tones? Because the earth has, in its own natural colors, many, many colors,
It's the Kelly Moore designation of
does
earth tones.
Does earth tones mean, are we talking, basically dirt colors, or or can earth tones be anything that's of the earth? It sounds like a silly question, but I'm serious.
Generally beiges, more natural tones, more subdued tones, but there can be accent colors that are also green and
rust.
Rust, that's true. But it is a highly discretionary term, and
yes, that's why I have a problem with them in ordinances when they're so discretionary.
so certainly this is precisely what we're looking for your feedback on.
So Inga, if we do that, and if I come in with a development proposal for 6 units, then I'd like to have a combination of blue and gold, because I'm a Cal guy. And
well, is it a light blue?
no, it's dark blue. It's royal blue. It's
It's a
royal blue and
ferocious blue.
bright gold. I mean, it's from a processing standpoint, Liz. Would you have anything to say against that?
If it weren't in this ordinance, I guess is what the question would be. I mean, would there be an architectural review process as a part of the approvals process? Would it come before at least some board to say, we don't like, Tom, with all due respect, we don't like your blue and yellow, we'd prefer something a little bit more subdued?
You'd have a more difficult argument to make, and we've had those before. You'd have to hold it to a neighborhood compatibility type of threshold instead of a specification such as earth tones. So I think it would be more difficult to defend, but certainly you could stand behind a compatibility type of standard.
Could that be the language? That, long-term durability and appearance in all colors shall be compatible with San Carlos, neighborhood, something or other?
I again would have an issue with that.
I guess the question is how, I think Tom makes a good point, and how do you control that? Even, we had a project at South Laurel recently with some pretty wild colors, and we got some complaints about that. How do you go about controlling something like that if you don't have something in writing, that sets up a standard? I agree with you, Inga, that earth tones is rather, that's why I asked the question about what is an earth tone.
So I think more than anything, the question is a policy question, And if we're going to come back and revisit this potentially as under our general plan, I don't want to get too hung up on this language. But we don't have the language now. I don't seem to think that we have an issue currently. I think that market forces tend to dictate some of this. So what we're seeing is that developers in town are not putting in purple buildings, because I don't know about you and the other people, but I wouldn't like to live in a purple building. And so there is some of that in terms of market forces putting some pressure. On the flip side, I don't want to see San Carlos where you drive through San Carlos and you can't tell if you've driven through San Carlos or Redwood City, or because everyone looks exactly the same, and that all of the peninsula has become earth-toned. That we ought to be able to have some uniqueness here within our community. Just like, we've got way too many, beige buildings with red tile roofs. You look at Home Depot, you look at, that whole complex, Trader Joe's now. I don't want all of San Carlos to look like that. I like the diversity. I think a lot of people are keying off of the Drake Building initially because staff has said, here's a symbol of San Carlos, the Drake Building. And so you're seeing a lot of that. But then again, we're also seeing some really attractive buildings throughout the community that are not earth tones. And I don't think we should necessarily be so hard and fast that, guess what? We so much love earth tones that we've got a law that says you've got to fit within this spectrum of colors. So.
Yeah, I do hope when we talk about the general plan, we talk about what we want San Carlos to look like. And this is one of those elements. It's highly subjective when you get into, palettes and so forth of color. Although we certainly could do that, is pick a palette range of colors that has to sort of fit within as a guideline. I love the idea of art directing the city. Come on, that's just doesn't get any better than that. That's a great project.
You can have that, Joe.
In his spare time.
But it is highly subjective, so I think we should just talk about. I would love it if we could talk about what some of that language is. We give some guidance to the Architectural Design Review Committee, but we do have some examples. I mean, when Yoga Blue went in, but that's maybe that's an earth tone. At least, I mean, there are flowers that color, but certainly doesn't necessarily speak to this sort of range or beige and magentas and browns and tertiary colors. So. I don't know how we work with subjective language, but I'm sure we could work on that, and as we should. I do think that the cities shouldn't look just cookie cutter, and we shouldn't stick to one style. We should allow for some diversity in style.
So what am I hearing then? Are we going to
Well, I have no
go
problem
along with
taking
striking
it.
this?
Yeah, I have no problem taking it out.
You do?
No, I do not.
You do not?
As long as we understand what happens after the fact. I
Okay.
think we've been through that.
But staff could work with developers that would be coming to town and letting them know that.
Strongly encourage.
Strongly encourage them to work within a reasonable palette of colors so that, we don't get, I'm using your shirt as an example. Do you want to turn around so everyone can see bright colors like that on our buildings, especially multifamily residential or high-density residential? But, I think staff have
We could certainly do that with the neighborhood compatibility threshold, which you already have really in your design review guidelines outside of this ordinance, so.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, we're on page 9. I do have this important typo, the fourth line up. City Councilor Herbie. I think it should be hereby.
Oh, fourth lineup.
Fourth
Oh, we
line up.
did, Herbie.
First spot, H-E-I-E.
Okay.
That's all.
It's a public hearing. Now, do you want to?
Yeah, I know that. I do have a speaker card here.
Okay.
From Kevin Kirkpatrick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you, Liz.
Hi, I'm Kevin Kirkpatrick. I live on Elizabeth Street in San Carlos. And about 6 weeks ago, I received a letter in the mail that a developer had bought the property behind mine and is planning a 20-unit, three-story condo. So I'm very interested in this whole topic of multi-dwelling units. And as I look through this, I think to keep in mind that a lot of the provisions in this code are not to put barriers for developers to building multi-family dwellings. It's to offer some protection for the people that are most affected by these, namely the neighbors. So there's comments in here, and all of the protections, most of them are lined out. And I'd just like council to keep in mind as they look through these. One of them is orientation of outdoor living areas should be away from neighboring bedroom areas to promote privacy. That's eliminated. Landscaping shall be implemented to screen views from the street and neighboring properties.
I'm sorry, just for clarification, they haven't actually been eliminated. They've just been moved into this table. So they still exist within the tables that are replacing what was just unclear language. So if you look on, on page 7, under the supplemental standards, it's still there, the language that you're talking about.
Oh, okay. When I printed this out, I saw the paragraphs were struck out.
Yeah,
and I thought
they
that
were.
was
And what
deleted.
staff has done is has stricken out some of the language that was in paragraph form and placed it more into this sort of table format. So the actual language still does exist, and the protections still do exist within them.
Okay. Maybe I should get a printout of that then, and then I will.
Yeah,
I
I wanted to make sure that you understood that, the only thing, from my understanding from staff, the only real substantive changes are the addition of design guidelines, which actually, I think, are further protection for the neighbors to make sure that the building next to them is not going to be a solid wall 3 stories up, but that there's going to be some facade relief and some colors and some variation so that it's a little bit more interesting at least.
Okay. I'll probably be back because I think the building they're proposing is a 3-story building next to my single-family dwelling, so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, I just want to thank you for coming and speaking, because even if your specific concerns as how this is written may be mitigated by those things being pulled into the chart, as Inga pointed out, I do appreciate you coming because it does show us that there is a concern, especially as multifamily starts to bump up against single family in cases where folks like yourself, you probably didn't even expect this to be happening in your backyard. And so I appreciate your coming to us, staying till this late hour, and making the point, because I think the more general point is, when I have a single-family home and I have an R3 behind me I didn't even know about, and a structure suddenly gets built, there's some sensitivity issues there, and so I appreciate you coming out tonight and speaking to us about that. Okay.
I would, if there's no further public comment, move to close the public hearing.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Roll call.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes.
I would then introduce ordinance number 1368, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos to amend Chapter 18.30 multifamily residential with the corrections that were brought up this evening related to typos within the tables and on page 9 under Section 2, as well as the elimination of the language on page 9, item B, with the colors relating to predominantly being earth tones, and that would be based on the 2 findings contained within the staff report. Is that right?
Okay, we've had a motion. We need a second.
Second.
Tom, seconds. Any further discussion? No? Okay, then we'll move on to vote.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Okay, that concludes all the items on the agenda except for public comment. If we have anybody from the public who would wish to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.